Heat hit me first, thick, smoky, reeking of burnt pine and sour wine. Not the icy sting of the executioner's block I'd braced for, but the suffocating warmth of a brazier too close to my face. My back screamed, not from the straw pallet I died on last time, but from a rug of stiff silk digging into Bierry skin. I forced my eyes open. Dim light, embers in a bronze basin, moonlight bleeding through a lattice window. My hands, smaller, softer, no scars from years of scrubbing, trembled against my chest. This wasn't the SQA. This wasn't the axe. Up. A boot jabbed my ankle. That voice, gravel under CART wheel. Jean Gouet, Stue RD of the Marquis of Dingbay. In my first life, he'd dragged me from the hayloft at dawn, his breath hot with sorghum wine, tossed me into a mule Artie. Master sold you to General Wei. Don't keep him waiting. Sold. To Wei Rong, the butcher of Hashi. I'd RD the tales. Villages raised for a sack of millet, concubines in iron kala RS, a man gutted for sneezing during our council. Last time, I'd sobbed, clawed the CART slats till my nails split, Renetta slap that burned for days. This time, I didn't move. My gaze slid to the table. A bronze hairpin lay there, cheap, the kind I'd stolen from a laundry maid's trunk at 10. Good for picking locks then. Better now. You deaf. Jean Gouet leaned in, his shadow swallowing mine. Lick and sweat rolled off him. I waited till his hand clamped my arm, then drove the pin's tip into the soft web between his thumb and forefinger. He yelped, jerking back. I rolled to my feet, yanking the pin free. You little, shut up. My voice was steadier than I expected. I'd honed it my second year in the scullery when the kitchen supervisor tried to steal my rice. Tell the Marquis I'm not going to Rome. Tell him if he sells me again, I'll scream loud enough for the whole compound to hear how he gambled away his daughter's dowry last month. Or should I mention the salt smuggler's silver? The 3 bodies in the canal? Jean Gouet paled. He knew I was bluffing mostly. I'd overheard the Marquis and his cronies, drunk on osmanthus wine, boasting of side ventures. But he didn't know how much he rode uncertainty was my blade. You wouldn't. Try me. I stepped Tawa RD the door, the pin glinting in my palm. The hall beyond was quiet, servants still abed, rising EARLY for chores. I needed speed. Guardias would come once Jean Gouet reported. I couldn't outrun them.
Didn't need to.
Needed him, the crown prince.
Zhou.
Last life, I'd seen him once from Offa at a banquet for imperial envoys. Pale, robes too loose, eyes sunken, poisoned, I later Leah Rened, by his uncle, the emperor's brother, who craved the throne. They hid him here, in the Marquis's estate, pretending he was a sickly southern cousin. I'd never spoken to him then, but I knew where they kept him, the east wing, behind the wisteria trellis, guarried by 2 men who swapped shifts at the hour of the snake. I crept down the hall, feet silent on cold tiles. Wisteria brushed my hair, leaves damp with dew. The guardias were there, one picking his teeth with a splinter, the other yawning, helmet askew. I waited till the toothpicker turned to spit, then to root 4-way RD, slipping through the half-open door, sandalwood and sickness. Zhao sat by the window, wrapped in a quilt, a single candle lighting his face. He looked up, eyes widening. Who? No time, I hissed, shutting the door. They're selling me to Rome. If I go, I'm dead. If I stay, I'm dead. But if you help me, I can help you. He read, fingers tightening on the quilt. Thinner than I remembered, cheeks hollow, but his eyes sharp, like a hawk's. How do you know Rome? Because I died once, I said. The axe's edge, the crowd's ROAR, the cold seeping into my bones flashed behind my eyes. I shoved it down. And, because I heard the Marquis talking to Stue Road. About you. About the poison in your tea. About your uncle paying to keep you sick. His breath caught. Silence stretched. Then he leaned 4-way RD, voice low. What do you want? To not be sold like a pig, I said. To see Wei Rong's head on a spike. Your uncle's. The Amatherquis's. I paused. First, get me out of here. Out of this estate. Out of the city. He studied me, gaze lingering on the pin in my hand. Then he nodded. Tunnel. Behind the wardrobe. Leads to the old well in the Reborn. Climb the wall, to the alley. You're not coming? Can't, he said, bitter. Leave. They'll know I'm well. Then they'll kill me for sure. He reached under his pillow, pulled out a jade token, imperial green, CA reved with a dragon.
Take this.
Westgate Gua, RDS loyal to my mother's family. They'll let you pass. I took the token, its COL surface pressing into my palm. Why help me? You're the first in 3 RS who hasn't lied, he said. Then a faint, sad smile. And if you remember what you shouldn't, maybe the gods aren't done with me. I slipped the token into my sleeve, pushed the wardrobe aside. A narrow gap in the wall, musty air rolling out. Thank you. Wait. He held out a silk pouch, embroidered with lotuses. Silver. Not much. And he hesitated. BCA refill. Wei Rong's men patrol the roads, looking for runaways. I nodded, ducked into the tunnel. DARK closed around me, walls rough against my shoulders. A rooster crowed above.
Dawn.
By the time the Amarquis realized I was gone, I'd be miles away. But I wasn't running forever. Running Tawa RD a chance to rewrite fate. Tawa wrote a life where I chose. The tunnel spat me into the Reborn, behind the crumbling well. I climbed the stone lip, hands scraping moss, peered over the wall. Empty alley, stray dogs sniffing vegetable scraps. I dropped down, landed soft. De route Tawa, RD the West Gate. The Gua RDS matched Zhao Li's description. One tall, SCA are across his cheek, the other shorter, helmet tipped back, chewing dried fruit. I held out the token. The Crown Prince sends me, I whispered. The SCA read Gua RD's eyes widened. He glanced at his companion, nodded.
Go. Hurry.
Shift changes soon. I slipped through the gate, the token Wa RM in my sleeve. The capital was waking, vendors setting up stalls, housewives drawing water, children chasing cats. I blended into the crowd, BA reef feet leaving Noma RKS on packed dirt. Where to go? Zhao Li mentioned his mother's family, the Duchess of Liang, in Jing province. Weeks away by foot. No horse, no provisions. Needed a plan that I turned down a side street, quieter, lined with apotheke rise and tea shops. A sign caught my eye, Lin's Herbs. Granny Lin, the old herbalist who tended the Amarquis's concubines, slipped me Roxuga once when the kitchen supervisor wasn't looking. Maybe she'd help. I pushed open the door. Dried roots and incense. An old woman behind the counter, grinding something in a mortar. She looked up, eyes narrowing. You're not from around here. Need help, I said. Running from the Amarquis of Dingbei. He sold me to Wei Rong. Her hand stilled. Wei Rong. That butcher. She studied me, gestured to a stool.
Seat.
Talk. I told her, leaving out Rebirth. The sale, the escape, the Crown Prince. When I finished, she sighed. Guts, girl. But you won't last a day alone. Wei Rong's men everywhere. She stood, moved to a shelf of Jia RS. Nephew in Jing. Runs a CA Raven. Leaves tomorrow at dawn. Letter gets you passage. But you'll owe me. Anything. She wrote quickly, sealed the letter with wax, handed it over with a bundle. COA RSE robe, cloth shoes, dried meat.
Change.
Robe hides your hair. You look too much like a noble house servant. Head down. Anyone asks, you're my niece, helping at the shop. I thanked her. Stepped back into the street. Sun higher now, long shadows. Adjusted the robe. Tucked hair under the hood. Headed for the CA Raven station. Thoughts of Zhao Li. Alone in that room. Waiting for poison. Wei Rong, his axe, his Kala RS. The Amarquis, counting silver. Anae his lies were unraveling. This time, I'd hold the knife. The CA Raven left at dawn. 20 wagons, silk, spices, tea, a dozen guardias with swords and crossbows. I rode in the last wagon, huddled under furs, Granny Lynn's letter tucked in my belt. First day passed quietly, ferry across the river, choppy water, biting wind. Camped in a Clea ring that night, men building a fire, passing a wine flask. I stayed NEAR the wagons, chewing dried meat, watching STARS third day, trouble. Hills ahead, first a row flew, embedded in the wagon side. Bandits, someone shouted. Guardias sprang into action, swords drawn, circling the wagons. I crouched lower, heart pounding. These weren't common bandits. Their leader rode a black horse, face hidden behind a wolf fur mask. Wei Rong's men. I'd seen that mask before, raiding a border village, ordering houses burned, women dragged away. Stomach twisted. Found me, I was dead. Worse than dead. Fighting brief, brutal. 2 guardias fell. Rest held. Wolf Mask shouted. Bandits retreated into the hills. CA Raven Master, burly, BARD like a bush, knelt by the fallen, face grim.
Move. Now.
Before they return with more. Traveled faster after that, stopping only to rest horses. 5th day, reached Jing. Smaller than the capital, busier. Markets crowded with F.A. Ramirez, artisans hammering metal, children playing tops. CA Raven Master led me to a La RG house on the outskirts, gates guarded by men in blue uniforms. Granny Lynn's nephew. He told the Guarod, letter for the Duchess. Guarod nodded, Desape read. Minutes later, a woman emerged, tall, elegant, hair streaked with gray. The Duchess of Liang. Took the letter, read it, looked at me. Zhao Li sent you. I nodded at slow, RM's smile.
Come.
Safe here.
Safe.
Hadn't felt safe in either life. Not as a scullery maid, not as Wei Rong's property, not before the axe fell. But here, Duchess's hand on my shoulder, I let myself believe it for a second. Then remembered why I was here. Save Zhao Li, bring down Wei Rong. Never be sold again. Need to message the Crown Prince, I said. Tell him I'm here. I have a plan. Smile faded. Plan? Child, you're lucky alive. Capital's a viper's nest. Wei Rong's spies everywhere. Even here. I know, I said. But I know things. Wei Rong's supply lines. His meetings with the Marquis. The poison in the Crown Prince's tea. Met her gaze. I can help. Need your help first. Studied me long, then sighed.
Fine.
Send a messenger. But if this fails, if you get my son killed, I'll feed you to the wolves myself. I grinned.
Deal.
Messenger returned a week later, face pale. Crown Prince lives. But worse. Marquis doubled the poison. BA Rely stands. Blood ran cold. Knew it would worsen. Seen Zhao Li waste away last time. Skin yellow, eyes glassy. Hearing it move faster, I said. Duchess, get me into the capital? Disguised.
Can, messenger said.
Risky. Wei Rong's men check every CA riage. Looking for a girl your age, SCA, are on left cheek.
Paused.
From fighting Zhang Gui? Touched the spot. Smooth. UNSCA read. This life, the pin pricked Zhang Gui, not me. But the Marquis must have described me. Better disguise, I said. Wei Pasqua RDS. Duchess A ranged it, merchant's wife, traveling to visit a sick mother. Padded jacket, SCARF covering hair, face dusted with rice powder. 3-day journey, roads clogged with refugees fleeing Wei Rong's raids. Capital Gate, Gua RDS stopped us. Papers. One growled. A Madame Zhou, plump, smooth-voiced, handed over a scroll. Gua Road read it, glanced at me. Who's she? Niece, Madame Zhou said. Helping nurse. Gue RD snorted. Another mouth. Move. Through the gate, he RT pounding. Capital unchanged, crowded, noisy, smell of fried dough and horse manure. Madame Zhou led me to a small house in the western Quarter. Windows boa ride, ya RD overgrown. Crown Prince's man meets here at midnight, she said.
No lamp.
No opening door for anyone else. She left. I settled in, chewing stale bread, listening to the city. Dogs barking, children laughing, distant drumbeat. Midnight, soft knock. Open door to a young man in servant's garb, face shadowed. Crown Prince sent me. Summer pavilion in the Marquis's Reborn. Guardias change at the hour of the rat. You have until then. Nodded, slipped into the night. Marquis's estate quiet, household asleep. Crept through the Reborn, wisteria heavy with blooms, air sweet. Summer pavilion.rk, shutters closed.
Soft knock, door creaked open.
Zhao Li by the window, candle flickering. Worse than before, cheeks sunken, eyes purple-ringed. But saw me, smiled. You came back. Said I would, I said, sitting beside him. How bad? Bad, he said. Poison in my blood now. Herbalist says a month, maybe 2. Cough, wet, hacking, made my chest tighten. But forget that. Plan. Pulled out a packet, dried herbs ground to powder, Granny Lynn's antidote. Counteracts the poison. Not a cure but buys time. Twice daily, mix with honey. Handed it over, then another, a arsenic and sulfur mixture. Sprinkle this on the Marquis's wine. Not enough to kill, just sicken. Weakens his grip. Makes people question him. Took the packets, fingers brushing mine. Been busy. Practice, I said. Told him the rest. Ca Ravengois RDS intel. Madame Jo's gossip. Messenger's reports. Wei Rong's supply lines. Next meeting with the Marquis. Weapons cache in the old temple outside the city. Hit the temple, I said. Burn the weapons. Cut their supplies. No weapons, Wei Rong can't coup. No Marquis's silver, can't pay men. Listened, eyes sharpening with each word. Finished, leaned back, thoughtful. Risky. Caught, won't be, I said. Done this before. Sort of. Laughed, dry, rusty, but a laugh. Something else, you know? Scullery maid who knows more strategy than my generals. Not a scullery maid anymore, I said. Not this life. Reached out, took my hand. Palm-moi rm. Calloused from a sword he'd never wielded. Thank you. For not giving up. Thank yourself. For trusting me. Silence, listening to night sounds, leaf rustle, cricket chirps, owl hoots. Squeezed my hand.
Go.
Before Gua, RDS change. START the antidote tonight. Marquis's wine tomorrow. Stood, paused. After we take them down, what then? Looked up, eyes steady. Take my throne. You owe anything. Title.
Land.
Court position. Whatever you choose. Smiled. Don't want a title. Don't want land. Just never be sold again. Never beg for bread. Choose my own path. Nodded. Then, that's what you'll have. I swear it. Slipped out, back into the night.
Stare se bright, munatin crescent.
Lighter than either life. Walking a road of my own making. Dangerous, yes. Pitfalls, enemies. But not alone. That made all the difference. That next 2 weeks blurred. Shuttled between Jing and the capital. Ca wrying messages. Delivering herbs. Gathering whispers. Zhao Li took the antidote. Color returning. Cheeks filling, cough easing. Marquis weakened. Face pale. Hands trembling. Exactly as planned. Whisper spread. Marquis cursed. Gods angry. Ancestors offended. Authority wavered. Stue RDS ignored orders. Gua RDS slacked. Struck on the full moon. Zhao Li's man led loyalists to the old temple. Weapons cache. I went, disguised as a boy. Hair tucked under a cap. Face SMA red with soot. Temple.rk. Roof caved. Walls ivy covered. Crept inside. Mold and old incense thick in the air. Weapons there, swords, SBARS, arose. Guarried by 6 of Wei Rong's men. Surprised them, swords flashing in moonlight. Over in minutes, Gua RDS fled, leaving the armis, doused with oil, lit the pyre. Fire ROA red, lighting the night, heat searing my face. Wei Rong's reinforcements arrived to ashes. News spread like wildfire. Butcher of Hashi's cash destroyed, plans ruined. M.A. Requis collapsed during council, foaming at the mouth. Physicians called it a stroke, I knew better. Zhao Li recovered. Ape read at court the next day, shocking the nobility. Exposed the M.A. Requis's treason, dealings with Wei Rong, poisoning the crown prince. M.A. Requis arrested, estates confiscated, family exiled. Wei Rong fled, captured a week later, had displayed on the city gate. Capital celebrated for days. Bonfires in streets, vendors selling dragon-shaped cakes, children waving flags. I watched from a rooftop, wind hugging my hair, smile on my lips. Over. Wei Rong dead. M.A. Requis ruined. Zhao Li on the throne, found Zhao Li in the palace Jie Redens, by the lotus pond, robes shimmering in sunlight. Looked up as I approached, smile wa RM you're here. AM, I said, sitting beside him. Checking my handiwork.
Laughed.
My handiwork too. Couldn't have done it without you. Reached into a sleeve. Pulled out a small box. Something for you. Opened it. Gold hairpin, inlaid with PRLS, CA Reved with a phoenix. Beautiful. Yours, he said. Token of gratitude.
And a request. Stay.
Be my advisor. My partner. Not just in this, but everything. Court needs someone who sees what others miss. Who speaks truth. Who hesitated, EARS reddening. Who I CA about. SDA read at him. He RT pounding. First life. Never to red dream this. Standing beside a prince. Seen as more than a servant. But this wasn't that life. This was now. Now I chose. Took the hairpin, fastened it into my hair. I'll stay. One condition. Name it. No more being sold. No more being told what to do. I'm my own person. Zhao Li, remember that. Grinned. Took my hand. Wouldn't have it any other way. Sat in silence, watching lotus flowers float, sun wa RM on our faces. First time in 2 lives at peace. Reborn not just in body, but in life. Strong, valued, loved. Lean my head on his shoulder, knowing this was the life I was meant to live. Not a victim, not a pawn. A woman who fought for her place, and one that wind CA ride laughter from the city below, mingling with leaf rustle, a fish splashing in the pond. Good sound. Sound of freedom. Sound of home. Mind the morning after the celebrations, I woke to a weight on my chest, not physical, but the quiet hum of possibility. For Yaras, I'd measured my worth in scraps, a crust of bread, a kind word from Granny Lin, the fleeting wa RMTH of Zhao Li's hand. Now, the palace corridors stretched before me, polished wood underfoot, silk hangings swaying in the breeze, and no one to tell me where to step. I dressed in the robe the Duchess had sent, soft blue silk, sleeves embroidered with silver lotuses, and pinned my hair with a phoenix pin. It felt less like an ornament, more like a crown. Zhao Li found me in the antechamber, reviewing a stack of petitions from border villages. He leaned over my shoulder, chin brushing my hair. You're already working? It's BA Rely Dawn. Idle hands invite trouble, I said, not looking up. Besides, these villagers are re-reporting Wei Rong's remnants, bandits harassing trade routes. If we don't act, they'll regroup. He chuckled, pulling a chair beside me. My advisors used to bury such reports under urgent matters. You put them front and center. Because they are re-urgent, I said, tapping a line about a burned granary. STA, Arving people turned to banditry. Fix the grain. Fix the problem. We spent the morning drafting orders. Seed shipments to the border. Extra Gua RDS for trade CA ravens. Amnesty for bandits who surrendered. By noon, the council chamber was buzzing. Old ministers who'd once ignored me as a scullery maid now leaned in when I spoke. I watched their faces, some impressed, some resentful, all calculating. Let them calculate. I'd Leah Rened long ago. Power wasn't given. It was taken, one decision at a time. That afternoon, a messenger arrived from the M.A. Requis's old estate. The Stue RD, Zhang Gui, had been found in a ditch, throat slit. No surprise, he'd known too much about the Amarquis's dealings. But the note added, the butcher's marque was on his wrist. Wei Rong's brand, a stylized wolf's head. So he wasn't done.
Good.
Let him come.
Ide for Sabursa.
Zhao Li read the note, jaw tightening. We need to secure the borders. Double the patrols. Already done, I said. Sent the orders this morning. Also, I've asked Granny Lin to train a team of herbalists, teach them to identify poisons, treat wounds. We'll need them if Wei Rong uses underhanded tactics. He sta read at me, then laughed. Real, Ungui right. When did you become so efficient? When I stopped waiting for someone else to fix things, I said. Besides, you're not the only one who's been planning. He reached across the table, took my hand. I'm glad you're here. Every day I wake up and think, this is real. You're real. I squeezed his hand. Real enough to keep you in line. Evenings in the palace became our ritual. We'd walk the Gardens, cut the courtiers, talking about nothing and everything, how the lotus buds were swelling, how the COK had perfected honey-glazed ham, how the northern tribes were sending envoys next month. Sometimes, we'd sit by the pond, skipping stones, competing to see whose would bounce farthest. Zhao Li's stones always sank after 2 skips. Mine sometimes made 4. He'd groan, you've had too much practice, and I'd grin. Surviving teaches you useful skills. One night, as we watched the moon rise, he grew quiet. I used to hate the moon, he said. In that room, it was the only thing that didn't lie. It rose, it set same as always. While everyone else pretended I was sick, it just watched. I leaned my head on his shoulder. Now it watches us. Together. He kissed my forehead, soft, lingering.
Together.
The next week brought the first test of our parinership. The northern envoys arrived, tall, stern-faced men, demanding more tribute in exchange for peace. The council was split. Some wanted to appease them, others wanted war. I sat silent through the debates, watching the envoys' eyes, how they lingered on our grain stores, our weapon racks. They weren't here for tribute. They were here to assess our weakness. When the council adjourned, I pulled Zhao Li aside. They're bluffing. Their herds are re-dying. Winter was hot, Arisich. They need our grain more than we need their peace. Offer them a trade. Grain for horses. But add a clause, if they attack, we cut off all trade for 5 years. They'll agree. They can't afford not to. He raised an eyebrow. How do you know their herds are re-dying? Refugees from the north, I said. They've been trickling in for months, begging for food. I asked Granny Lin to treat them. She said their children have rickets, their elders cough blood. Classic signs of malnutrition. He sta read at me, then laughed. You're terrifying, you know that? Terrifying and brilliant. The envoys agreed to the trade. Within a month, northern horses filled our stables, and our grana rise emptied at a manageable pace. The northern tribes dependent on our grain kept the peace. The council, once skeptical, now hung on my every word. Zhao Li took to introducing me as my advisor, Lady Shin, the name I'd chosen after the village where Granny Lin was born. It felt right. Shin meaning deep, profound. A name for someone who'd seen the depths of suffering and risen. Spring came, bringing with it a new challenge, a drought in the southern provinces. Rivers dried, crops withered, peasants rioted. The old ministers wanted to send troops to quell the unrest. I argued for aid instead. Rice from our reserves, engineers to dig wells, tax breaks for farmers. Troops will only make them angrier, I said. Help them survive, and they'll be loyal. Zhao Li backed me, and we implemented the plan.
It worked.
By summer, the rivers flowed again, crops recovered, and the southern provinces sent tributes of melons and peaches, the sweetest I'd ever tasted. The peasants sta root calling me Lady of the Revest, a nickname that made Zhao Li smile. They love you, he said one evening, popping a peach slice into my mouth. Almost as much as I do. I bit into the fruit, juice dripping down my chin. Almost. He wiped the juice with his thumb, then kissed me, slow, sweet, tasting of peaches. Never quite as much, he murmured against my lips. Autumn brought the news we'd been waiting for. Wei Rong's remnant had been spotted in the western hills, gathering followers. Zhao Li wanted to lead the army himself. I argued against it. You're the emperor now, I said. Your place is here, keeping the realm stable. Let General Su handle it. He's loyal, experienced, and hates Wei Rong almost as much as we do. He hesitated, then nodded. You're right. Again. But promise me, if things go wrong, you'll stay here. Safe. Promise, I said, though we both knew I'd break it if needed. Safety was a luxury I'd never afforded myself. General Su's campaign was swift. Within a month, Wei Rong's remnant was crushed, their leaders executed. The only survivor was a young boy, Wei Rong's nephew, no older than 10. The general wanted to kill him. I intervened. Spare him, I told Zhao Li. Raise him in the palace, teach him loyalty. Kill him, and he becomes a martyr. Spare him, and he becomes a symbol of our mercy. Zhao Li agreed. The boy, named Wei Ping, became a page in the palace, quiet, watchful. I'd catch him ring at me sometimes, eyes full of confusion, hating me for destroying his uncle, grateful for sparing his life. I didn't mind. Confusion was better than blind hatred. It left room for change. Winter came, and with it, a quiet joy. I was pregnant. Zhao Li found out first. Granny Lin told him, sworn to secrecy. He burst into my study, grinning like a fool, picked me up and spun me around. We're having a child, he said, setting me down gently, hands trembling on my waist. Heir. Our heir. I laughed, tears in my eyes. Put me down before you drop us both. He did, then knelt before me, pressing his ear to my belly. Hear that? A tiny heartbeat. Our future. I ran my fingers through his hair, thick and soft. Our future, I echoed. The pregnancy was easy, no morning sickness, just a constant hunger for pickled plums and roasted nuts. Zhao Li indulged me, ordering the kitchens to stock both at all times. He'd rub my feet in the evenings, complain about council meetings, and fall asleep with his head on my lap, snoring softly. I'd watch him, this man who'd been a ghost in a room, now a father-to-be, and think, this is what rebirth means. Not just living again, but living better. Spring returned, and with it, our son, crowning at dawn, screaming his lungs out as soon as he entered the world. Zhao Li cut the cord, hands steady, eyes shining. He has your nose, he said, voice thick. And my chin. I laughed, exhausted, as the midwife placed the babe in my arms. He was red, wrinkled, perfect. Wei Ping's Leah running to read, I said. He can teach our son. Zhao Li kissed my forehead, then the babe's. Teach him to be kind. Teach him to listen. Teach him that power isn't about ruling over people, but protecting them. I will, I said. And I'll teach him that his mother was once a scullery maid who fought for her place. And won. The years passed in a blur of diapers, council meetings, and bedtime stories. Our son, Zhao Ming, grew into a curious, kind-root boy with a love for climbing trees and asking why. Wei Ping became his tutor, teaching him history and strategy, while I taught him about the lives of commoners, how to plant rice, how to be a gain at markets, how to spot a liar by the twitch of their left eyelid. Zhao Li taught him to ride, to shoot, to rule with fairness. On Zhao Ming's 10th birthday, we held a grand feast. The court was there, the envoys, the peasants from the southern provinces, even Granny Lin, now white-haired but sharp as ever. Zhao Li stood, raising a cup of wine. Today, we celebrate not just my son's birth, but the woman who made our family possible. Lady Shen, my advisor, my partner, my love. Without her, I'd be dead. Without her, this realm would be in chaos. To Lady Shen. The crowd ROA read, cups clinking. I stood, blushing, and raised my own cup. To all of you, I said. To the peasants who taught me resilience, to the soldiers who protected us, to the children who remind us what we're fighting for. to our realm. May it thrive, may it heal, may it never forget those who suffered to build it. Later that night, Zhao Li and I walked the Jie Dens, Zhao Ming asleep on Wei Ping's shoulder. The moon was full, the lotus flowers in bloom. Zhao Li took my hand, his palm wa rm and familia r. Remember when we first sat here? He asked. You'd just escaped the Amarquis. I was half dead from poison. We thought we were alone. We were, I said. But we weren't. We had each other. And that was enough. He kissed me, soft and slow, under the moonlight. Enough then. Enough now. Enough forever. I leaned into him, breathing in the scent of lotus and sandalwood, feeling the weight of our sun in my heart, the strength of our realm at my back. This was the life I'd fought for, not perfect, not easy, but mine.
Ours.
A life where I was no longer a pawn, but a queen. Not a victim, but a victor. Not reborn to suffer, but reborn to live. And as the moon watched, same as it had all those years ago, I smiled. This time, it wasn't watching a ghost. It was watching a woman who'd claimed her place in the world, and would never let it go. The summer Zhao Ming turned 15, a delegation arrived from the northern tribes, led by the son of the envoy we'd negotiated with decades, Relier. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with eyes like flint, and he bowed deeply to Zhao Li, then to me. My father told me of your wisdom, Lady Shen, he said. He said you saved our people from starvation, and taught us that strength lies not in conquest, but in cooperation. I smiled, remembering the thin, hungry children I'd fed all those years ago. Your father was a wise man, I said. I hope you've inherited his foresight. He grinned. I have. Which is why I've brought a proposal, a marriage alliance. My sister for your son. Unite our peoples. Ensure peace for another generation. Zhao Li glanced at me, eyebrows raised. I nodded, subtly, but he caught it. We'll consider it, Zhao Li said. But only if your sister agrees. And if she's as wise as you claim. The young man laughed. She's wiser. Last winter, she reorganized our grain rise, preventing a famine. Father says she's more capable than half our council. Zhao Ming, standing beside me, leaned in. She sounds interesting, he whispered. I nudged him, hiding a smile. He'd grown into a fine young man, kind, intelligent, with a quick wit that reminded me of his father. But he had my stubbornness, too, refusing to back down from a debate, even with the oldest ministers. We invited the northern princess to stay for a month, to see if she and Zhao Ming suited. She arrived a week later, riding a chestnut Marie, her hair braided with silver beads, her eyes sharp and curious. She and Zhao Ming spent hours writing, debating history, even sparring with wooden swords. She won, to everyone's amusement. One evening, I found them by the lotus pond, skipping stones. Zhao Ming skipped still only 2, hers 4. She's perfect, Zhao Ming said later, grinning. Smart, funny, and she doesn't let me win at stones. Good, I said. You need someone who challenges you. The wedding was held in autumn, under the same moon that had watched us all those years ago. The northern tribes sent gifts, horses, furs, bolts of wool, and our realm reciprocated with silk, spices, and seeds for their fields. The celebration lasted 3 days, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the entire city. Zhao Li, now graying at the temples, stood beside me, hand in mine, watching our son Ma Rry, the woman who'd help rule the realm. Proud, he asked, voice soft. Beyond words, I said. But mostly I'm grateful. Grateful we lived to see this. Grateful we built something that lasts. He kissed my knuckles. We built it together. Years passed, and we grew old, Zhao Li's hair turning white, my steps slowing, but our minds as sharp as ever. Zhao Ming and his wife ruled wisely, continuing the policies we'd established. Aid for the poor, trade with neighbors, education for all. Wei Ping, now a respected Sholar, wrote a history of our reign, titled The Phoenix and the Dragon, after our hairpins. He dedicated it to the woman who rose from ashes, and the man who dared to trust her. On our 50th anniversary, Zhao Li and I sat by the lotus pond, same as always. The water was calm, the lotus flowers blooming, the moon full. He reached into his sleeve, pulled out a small box, worn wooden, the same one he'd given me decades earlier. Inside was the gold phoenix pin, its PRLS still gleaming. Remember this? He asked. Of course, I said. You gave it to me the day I became yours. You were never mine, he said, voice thick. You were always your own. I was just lucky enough to walk beside you. I took the pin, fastened it into my white hair. And I was lucky enough to have you beside me. He leaned his head on my shoulder, sighing contentedly.
I'm tired, Shen.
Tired of ruling, tired of waking up without you. But not tired of loving you. I wrapped my arm around him, feeling his frailness, his rmth, then rest. We've done enough. We've loved enough. We've lived enough. He closed his eyes, smiling. Together, he whispered. Together? I echoed. He died that night, peacefully, in my arms. The realm mourned for a month, peasants weeping in the streets, envoys sending condolences. Xiaoming Declay ring a year of mourning. I stood by his coffin, the phoenix pin glinting in the candlelight, and thought, this is what it means to live fully, to love deeply, to leave a legacy that isn't just stone and silk, but kindness and courage. I ruled as regent for a year, until Xiaoming was ready to take the throne fully. Then, I retired to the summer pavilion in the Marquis's old estate, the same pavilion where Zhao Li and I had plotted our revolution. I spent my days tending the wisteria, feeding the stray cats, and writing my memoirs, not for publication, but for Xiaoming's children, so they'd know where they came from. But on my 80th birthday, Xiaoming visited, his hair now gray, his grandchildren tumbling around him. He sat beside me, taking my hand. Grandmother, he said, the people still talk about you, about the scullery maid who became a queen, about the woman who saved the realm. I smiled, patting his hand. Tell them it wasn't magic.
It was choice.
Every day, I chose to fight, to love,
to live.
And that's a choice anyone can make. He nodded, eyes shining. I will. And I'll tell them about grandfather, too. About the prince who trusted a maid and changed the world. That night, I sat by the window, watching the moon rise. It was the same moon that had watched me die, that had watched me escape, that had watched me love. Now, it watched me prepare to join Zhao Li. I wasn't afraid. Death wasn't an end, it was a reunion. A chance to hold his hand again, to skip stones by the pond, to laugh under the lotus flowers. I closed my eyes, the phoenix pin heavy in my hair, and whispered his name. Somewhere, in the space between worlds, I felt his hand take mine. Together, I breathed, and then I was home. The tunnel spat me out behind the crumbling well, the damp air thick with the smell of moss and rotting leaves. My reef feet hit the ground harder than I'd expected, a jolt shooting up my spine. Above, the first sliver of gray light cut through the lattice of the well's rim. Dawn was closer than I'd thought. I scrambled up the stone lip, fingers scraping against the rough edges, and peered over the wall. The alley below was still empty, save for that same stray dog now gnawing on a chicken bone. No shouts yet.
No pounding footsteps.
That meant Zhang Gui hadn't raised the alarm. Or if he had, the Marquis's household was still too sluggish from last night's wine to move fast. I dropped into the alley, landing soft in a pile of straw. The bronze hairpin was still clutched in my left hand, its tip stained to RK with Zhang Gui's blood. I wiped it on the hem of my ragged underskirt, then tucked it back into my hair. The jade token from Zhao Li weighed heavy in my right sleeve, while RM from my body heat, a solid reminder that I wasn't alone in this. The east gate would be SWA or Meng with guardias by now. The Marquis's spies were thick there. The west gate, though, Zhao Li said it was manned by men loyal to his mother's family. It was my only shot. I stuck to the shadows between the buildings, my reef feet silent on the cold dirt. The capital was waking up. Somewhere, a baby cried, A vendor shouted about fresh buns. A dog bière ked. Normal sounds. Sounds I'd heard 1,000 times in my first life, when I was just another faceless servant fetching water before sunrise. Now they felt different.
Sha, purr.
Like I was hearing them for the first time. Because this time, I was the one choosing to be here. Choosing to run. The west gate loomed ahead, its wooden beams studded with iron nails. 2 guardias stood by the entrance, just as Zhao Li had described. One tall with a SCAR across his left cheek, the other shorter, his helmet tilted back as he chewed on something. I slowed my pace, forcing my breathing to steady. Panic would get me noticed. I needed to look like I belonged, like I was just another RLY riser, heading out to the Marquette GA Redens. I walked up to them, chin lifted. The SCA read Guard's eyes narrowed. Where you off to, girl? I pulled out the jade token, holding it flat on my palm, so the dragon CA Arving caught the weak morning light. The crown prince sends me, I whispered, keeping my voice low. No need to draw attention from the other RLY travelers shuffling past. The Guard's eyes widened. He exchanged a quick glance with his companion, then gave a RLY imperceptible nod. Go on, he muttered, stepping aside. And don't look back. I didn't. I slipped through the gate, the token still RM in my hand, and kept walking. The road outside the city was already busy. F.A. Ramirez driving CARTS piled high with cabbages and radishes, women balancing baskets of eggs on their hips, a group of monks chanting softly as they walked Tawa RD a NEA RBY temple. I blended into the crowd, my BA feet kicking up dust, my ragged clothes marking me as one of the lower class. No one looked twice at after mile. I turned onto a smaller path that wound through a grove of willow trees. The air here was solar, the sound of the city fading behind me. I leaned against a tree trunk, my legs suddenly shaking. I'd done it. I'd escaped the Marquis's estate. I'd spoken to the crown prince. I had a plan, but the adrenaline was wearing off, and reality was sinking in. I had no food, no water, no proper shoes. And Wei Rong's men were everywhere. If they caught me, the Marquis's punishment would seem like a mercy. I forced myself to move, following the path until it opened into a wider road. A signpost pointed south. Jing Province, 120 li. 2 FA are to walk in my condition. I needed help, and I needed it fast. Granny Lin's face floated into my mind. The old herbalist who'd slipped me rock suga are in the scullery. She had a shop in the city. NEA are the apotheke rise quaruter. If anyone would help a runaway servant, it was her. I turned back Tawa RD the city, sticking to the tree line to avoid the main road. The sun was fully up now, casting long shadows across the fields. Sweat trickled down my back, and my feet ached with every step. By the time I reached the apotheke rise quaruta, my legs were trembling, and my throat was parched. The street was crowded with shops, some selling dried herbs, others with cages of live snakes and scorpions for medicinal use. I found Lin's herbs easily. The sign was faded but familiar. I pushed open the door, the little bell above it jingling. The shop smelled of dried roots and incense, a scent that instantly calmed my racing heart. Granny Lin was behind the counter, grinding something in a mortar with slow, steady strokes. She looked up, her eyes clouded with age, rowing as she took me in. You're not from around here, she said, her voice raspy from years of inhaling herb dust. I need help, I said, my voice cracking. I'm running from the Marquis of Dingbei. He sold me to Wei Rong. Her hand stilled. The mortar clicked against the counter. Wei Rong, she repeated, her tone flat. That butcher. She studied me for a long moment, her gaze lingering on my BA feet, my tangled hair, the bruise already forming on my wrist from where Zhang Gui had grabbed me. Then she gestured to a stool in the corner.
Seat.
Tell me everything. Leave out the lies. I sat, my legs giving out beneath me. I told her about the sale, the escape through the tunnel, the crown prince. I left out the part about being reborn. Some things were too strange to explain, even to a kind old woman. When I finished, She sighed and pushed a cup of Luque tea tawa ardimi. I drank it greedily, the liquid soothing my raw throat. You've got guts, girl, she said. But you won't last a day on the road alone. Wei Rong's men are thick as fleas on a stray dog. They're looking for runaways, especially ones with your description. The Marquis's Stue RD, Zhang Gui, was found dead this morning. Throat slit. They'll blame you. My stomach dropped. Dead, I'd only pricked his hand with the pin. But in the chaos of the escape, someone else could have finished the job. Maybe one of the Marquis's rivals, or even Wei Rong's men cleaning up loose ends. Either way, it made me a fugitive. I need to get to Jing province, I said. The crown prince said his mother, the Duchess of Liang, would help me. Granny Lin nodded slowly. My nephew runs a CA Raven to Jing. Leaves tomorrow at dawn from the Eastern Station. I'll give you a letter, he'll take you with him. No questions asked. But you'll owe me a favor, girl. Herbs are rent-free, and neither is safety. Anything, I said. She stood, her joints creaking, and moved to a shelf lined with clay jaw RS. She pulled out a bundle, a COA RSE brown robe, a pair of cloth shoes, a packet of dried meat, and a small pouch of silver coins. Change into this. The robe will hide your hair. You look too much like a servant from a noble house. Keep your head down. If anyone asks, you're my niece. Come from the countryside to help with the shop. She wrote the letter quickly, sealing it with a dollop of red wax, then pressed it into my hand along with the bundle. Eastern Station. Ask for Uncle Chung. Don't be late. I thanked her, my eyes stinging. Kindness was a thing in my life, both of them. I changed into the robe behind a curtain, the rough fabric scratching my skin, but it was better than the thin underskirt I'd been wearing. The shoes were a size too big, but they'd protect my feet. I tied the packet of meat to my belt and tucked the silver pouch into the robe's inner pocket. The jade token and the hairpin stayed hidden in my hair, secured by a strand of twine. As I turned to leave, Granny Lin caught my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. One more thing, girl. The crown prince, you said he's being poisoned. I nodded. Take this. She pressed a small, stoppered vial into my hand. Inside was a pale green powder. It's ground from the root of the baiha flower. Counteracts most common poisons, slows the spread, gives the body time to heal. Mix a pinch into his tea twice a day. But don't overdo it. Too much will cause vomiting. And keep it hidden. If the Marquis's men find it, they'll know you're more than a simple runaway. I read at the vial, my throat tight. This was hope, tangible and small. Thank you, I whispered. She waved a dismissive hand. Just don't get yourself killed before you can repay me. Now go, before the morning patrol comes through. I slipped out the back door, avoiding the main street. The Eastern Station was on the opposite side of the city. A long walk, but safer than staying NEA, are the apotheke rise qua ruder. I kept to the alleys, my new shoes scuffing against the dirt. The city was fully awake now. Vendors shouting, children laughing, the clatter of CART wheels on stone. Normalcy, but I knew better. Somewhere out there, men were hunting me. Men who'd gut me without a second thought. I reached the Eastern Station just as the sun hit its zenith. It was a chaotic place. Wagons being loaded with goods, merchants arguing over prices, drivers yelling at oxen to move faster. I found Uncle Ching easily. A burly man with a BARD like a bushel of straw, supervising the loading of a wagon piled high with bolts of silk. I showed him Granny Lin's letter. He read it, grunted, and jerked his thumb. Tawa RD, the last wagon in the line. Hide under the furs. Don't poke your head out unless you want an row in it. We leave at dawn. I climbed into the wagon, burrowing under a pile of rough sheepskins. The smell was overwhelming, damp wool and animal grease, but it was RM, and it hid me completely. I lay there, listening to the sounds of the station, men shouting, animals braying, the creak of wooden wheels. My body ached, my eyelids grew heavy, and for the first time since I'd woken up in that brazier-heated room, I let myself relax. Just a little at dawn came 2 EARLY. The wagon jolted 4-way RD, throwing me against the wooden slats. I bit back a yelp, curling tighter under the furs. The CA Raven moved slowly at first, the wagons creaking and groaning as they navigated the crowded streets. Once we read the city gate, the pace picked up. I could hear the drivers whistling, the crack of whips, the rhythmic clip-clop of hooves on the hot, RD-packed road. I risked a peek through a gap in the furs. The sun was just rising, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Fields of wheat stretched out on either side, dotted with heroines bent over their work. It was beautiful, in a quiet way. Our cry from the suffocating walls of the Marquis's estate. We stopped at midday to rest the animals and eat. I unwrapped the packet of dried meat Granny Lynn had given me, chewing slowly. It was tough and salty, but it filled the hole in my stomach. Uncle Chung passed by the wagon, tossing a water skin at me. "Drink up," he grunted. "Next stop's not for 3 hours." I drank deeply, the sea water soothing my dry throat. As he walked away, I noticed a fresh SCAR on the back of his neck, a thin, white line, like a Whitma RK. I wondered what his story was. How many favors did Granny Lynn owe him? How many times had he hidden runaways in his wagons the afternoon passed uneventfully? The road wound through rolling hills, the landscape growing wilder the further we got from the capital. By evening, we'd set up camp in a clear ring surrounded by pine trees. The drivers built a fire, passing around a flask of wine and roasting strips of dried meat on sticks. I stayed hidden in the wagon, eating my own meager portion and listening to their talk. Most of it was mundane, complaints about the road, jokes about the merchants, stories of past CA ravens. But then one of the younger drivers mentioned Wei Rong. He rode the butcher's men a reactive NEA the border, the driver said, poking at the fire with a stick. Attacked a village last week. Took all the grain, killed half the men. Said it was a warning to the Duke of Liang. My blood ran cold. The Duke of Liang was the Duchess's husband, Zhao Li's father. If Wei Rong was targeting them, it meant the coup was closer than I'd thought. I strained to hear more, but the conversation shifted to safer topics. I lay back under the furs, my mind racing. I needed to get to the Duchess faster. Needed to RN her. Needed to get the antidote to Zhao Li before the poison finished its work. The next 2 days passed in a blur of jolts and bumps. The road grew rougher, the landscape more desolate. We passed through small villages, some abandoned, their doors hanging off their hinges, others bustling with wary-eyed residents who watched the CA Raven with suspicion. On the third morning, we hit troubled. We were crossing a narrow pass between 2 steep hills when the first arrow flew. It embedded itself in the side of the wagon with a solid thunk. "Bandits," someone shouted. The CA Raven lurched to a halt. I heard the drivers scrambling, the clash of swords being drawn, the panicked whinnying of horses. I curled into a ball under the furs, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. Bandits were common on this road, but these weren't just any bandits. Their leader rode a black horse, his face hidden behind a mask of wolf fur. Wei Rong's men. I'd recognized that mask anywhere, had seen it in my first life, just before the axe fell. The fighting was brief, but brutal. I heard the grunts of men, the ring of steel, the thud of a rose hitting flesh. Someone screamed, a high, piercing sound that cut off abruptly. Then, silence. I held my breath, waiting for the wagon flap to be thrown back, for a rough hand to drag me out. Instead, I heard the wolf-masked leader shout an order. Hooves pounded, growing fainter as the bandits retreated. Uncle Cheng's voice cut through the silence. "Everyone alive?" A chorus of groans answered him. I peeked out from under the furs. The clear ring was a mess. 2 drivers lay motionless on the ground, their blood staining the dirt red. The rest were gathered around the wagons, their faces pale and SCA red. The wolf mask leader was gone, but his men had taken 3 of the silk bolts and a bag of silver. A warning, not a full attack. They were testing us. Testing the defenses. Uncle Cheng knelt beside one of the fallen drivers, checking for a pulse. He shook his head, then stood, his jaw tight. "We move.
Now.
Before they come back with more men." He looked around the circle, his eyes harrowed. No fires tonight. No talking. We sleep in the wagons. And keep your swords handy. We traveled through the night, stopping only to change the oxen. I stayed hidden, my EARS straining for any sound of pursuit. But the road remained empty, the only noise the creak of the wagons and the occasional hoot of an owl. By dawn, we'd reached the outskirts of Jing province. The landscape changed. The hills flattened into fertile plains, the air grew warmer, and the scent of jasmine replaced the pine. We passed FARMS with neat rows of vegetables, orchestre RDS heavy with fruit, and villages where children waved at the CA raven from behind mud walls. Uncle Chung pulled the wagon to a halt outside a La RG estate surrounded by a high stone wall. The gates were guarided by men in blue uniforms, their SBARS gleaming in the morning sun. He climbed down, speaking briefly to the guard, then gestured for me to come out. I crawled from under the furs, my legs stiff and numb. The guard looked me over, then nodded, and Desape read inside the gate. Minutes later, a woman emerged. She was tall, her posture straight despite her age, her hair streaked with silver. She wore a robe of deep purple silk, embroidered with golden cranes, the colors of the Duchess of Lyon. She stopped in front of me, her dark eyes assessing. "You're the one Zhao Li sent," she said, her voice cool and precise. I nodded, suddenly tongue-tied. This was the mother of the crown prince, a woman of immense power and influence. In my first life, I'd only seen her from a distance at court banquets. Up close, she was intimidating. "Come," she said, turning on her heel. I followed her through the gates, into a courtyard filled with flowering plum trees. Servants bowed as we passed, their eyes downcast. The Duchess led me to a private chamber, its windows overlooking a koi pond. She gestured to a chair, then sat across from me, her hands folded in her lap. "Tell me everything," she said. "Start with why my son is still alive, and end with why I shouldn't throw you back to the wolves." I took a deep breath and began. I told her about the Marquis's betrayal, the sail to Rome, the escape through the tunnel. I told her about Zhao Li, how he was being poisoned, how he was wasting away in that room, how he'd given me the jade token. I told her about Granny Lin, the CA raven, the bandit attack. I left out the rebirth, again, too strange, but I included the antidote, pulling the vial of Baiha powder from my hair. "This will slow the poison," I said, placing it on the table between us. "Mix a pinch into his tea twice a day. But it's not a cure. We need to get him out of the Marquis's estate, and we need to expose the Marquis's treason before Rome launches his coup." The Duchess listened without interrupting, her face impassive. When I finished, she picked up the vial, rolling it between her fingers. "You expect me to believe my son is being poisoned by his own uncle? That the Marquis of Dingbei is in league with Rome? That a scullery maid, even one with a magical antidote, can fix this mess? I don't expect you to believe me," I said, meeting her gaze. "I expect you to verify it. Send a trusted physician to examine Zhao Li, check his chambers for traces of poison. Question the Marquis's servants discreetly, and ask yourself this: why would I risk my life to come here, if not for the truth?" She studied me for a long moment, then set the vial down. "You have spirit, I'll give you that. And my son's token is real. I recognize the dragon CA Arving. Very well. I'll send a physician. But if you're lying," she let the threat hang in the air. "I'm not," I said. She stood, ringing a small bell on the table. A servant Ape read. "Show her to the guest quarters," the Duchess ordered. "Feed her, clothe her, and make sure she doesn't leave the estate. If she tries, kill her." The servant bowed and led me away. The guest quarters were small but comfortable, a bed with a silk coverlet, a writing desk, a window overlooking the garden. A maid brought a tray of food: rice porridge, pickled vegetables, and a steamed bun stuffed with pork. I ate greedily, my body craving the nourishment. After a road, I bathed in a wooden tub filled with hot water scented with jasmine. The maid left a set of clean clothes, a simple cotton robe, but soft and well-made. I dressed, then sat on the bed, exhaustion washing over me. I slept for what felt like days. When I woke, the sun was streaming through the window, and a different maid was laying out fresh clothes. "The Duchess requests your presence in the Reborn," she said, her voice respectful. I followed her to a pavilion overlooking the koi pond. The Duchess was there, along with an elderly man in physician's robes. He bowed as I approached. "The Duchess has summoned me," he said. "She tells me you have information about the Crown Prince's condition." I nodded. "He's being poisoned. Slow acting, probably mixed into his tea. The symptoms: fatigue, loss of appetite, yellowing of the skin, coughing fits. The antidote I gave the Duchess, *BIHA* powder, will slow it, but it's not a cure." The physician's eyebrows rose. "How do you know this?" "I saw him," I said simply. "In the Requis's estate. I spoke to him." The physician exchanged a glance with the Duchess, then turned back to me. "I examined the Crown Prince 3 days ago. His symptoms match your description. I suspected poison, but couldn't identify the type. This BIHA powder, where did you get it?" "Granny Lynn, the herbalist in the capital," I said. "She said it counteracts most common poisons." The Duchess leaned 4-way road. The physician confirmed it. "Zhao Li is indeed being poisoned, which means you were telling the truth." Her tone was grudging, but there was a glint of respect in her eyes. "Now, we need a plan. Wei Rong's forces, a remassing NEA, are the border. The Requis is hosting a banquet for the imperial envoys next week, a perfect opportunity to strike. But we need evidence of their treason, something we can present to the emperor." "I can get it," I said. "The Requis keeps his records in a locked chest in his study. I've seen the key. He wears it on a chain around his neck. If I can sneak back into the estate, steal the records, and get them to you?" "Absolutely not," the Duchess said sharply. "It's too dangerous. If you're caught, you'll be tortured for information. And we can't risk losing you. Not when you're the only one who's spoken to Zhao Li directly." "I'm the only one who can do it," I argued. "The Guardias know my face. They'll think I'm a returning servant. And I know the layout of the estate. The tunnel, the study, the Guardias routines. No one else does." The Duchess hesitated. The physician read his throat. "If I may, Your Grace, the girl has a point. We need those records. And she's already proven resourceful. With proper preparation, the risk could be minimized." The Duchess sighed, rubbing her temples. "Very well, but you won't go alone. I'll send 2 of my most trusted men with you. They'll wait outside the estate, provide a distraction if needed. And you'll take this." She pulled a small dagger from her sleeve, its blade thin and sharp, for protection. "And this." She handed me a small pouch.
Poison.
"Colorless, tasteless. If you're caught, use it on yourself before they can torture you. I won't have you betraying my son." I took the dagger and the pouch, my fingers closing around them. The metal was cold, but it felt like power. "I won't betray him," I said.
Or you.
The Duchess stood, her expression softening slightly. "See that you don't. You leave at midnight. The physician will give you a stronger dose of the antidote, enough to last Zhao Li a month. And a letter for my husband, the Duke. He'll be waiting NEA, the capital, with his men. Once you have the records, get to him. He'll handle the rest." I bowed, my heart pounding. This was it. The real mission. Steal the evidence, save the Crown Prince, stop the coup. Failure wasn't an option. Not this time. That night, I read. The physician gave me the antidote, a La Rigger vial, stoppered with wax. The Duchess's men, 2 burly Guardias named Fong and Lei, outfitted me with d'arc clothing, a rope for climbing, and a small lantern. We left at midnight, slipping out of the estate through a hidden postern gate. The road to the capital was quiet, the moon hidden behind clouds. We traveled on foot, moving swiftly through the darkness. Fong and Lei were silent, their faces grim. They knew the stakes as well as I did. We reached the capital just before dawn. The city was still asleep, the streets empty. We circled to the back of the Requis's estate, where the tunnel entrance was hidden. Feng and Lei waited in the shadows, their swords drawn. I took a deep breath, then slipped into the tunnel, the lantern casting flickering shadows on the damp walls. The air was thick with the smell of EARTH and decay. I moved quickly, my BA feet silent on the packed dirt. The tunnel seemed longer this time, the darkness heavier. I emerged behind the well, just as before. The GA den was quiet, the wisteria heavy with dew. I crept toward the main house, sticking to the shadows. The guardians were at their posts, sleepy but alert. I waited until one turned to cough, then to root across the open space to the study window. It was shuttered, but one shutter was loose. I pried it open, slipping inside. The study was dark, the air thick with the smell of ink and old paper. I lit the lantern, shielding it with my hand, and scanned the room. The chest was where I remembered, locked, as expected. The key. The Marquis wore it around his neck, which meant I needed to get into his bedroom. I crept up the stairs, my heart pounding. The Marquis's bedroom was at the end of the hall. The door was ajar. I peered inside. He was asleep, snoring softly, a wine jug on the floor beside the bed. The key glinted on a chain around his neck. I crept forward, holding my breath. My hand trembled as I reached for the chain. The Marquis stirred, mumbling in his sleep. I froze, my heart in my throat. Then he settled back down, his breathing evening out. I unhooked the chain carefully, biting back a yelp as the metal scraped against his skin. He didn't wake. I backed out of the room, the key clutched in my hand. Back in the study, I knelt before the chest. The key fit. I turned it, the lock clicking open. Inside were scrolls, letters, ledgers, maps. I unrolled one of the letters. It was from Wei Rong, discussing troop movements, payment schedules, and the elimination of the Crown Prince. My blood ran cold. This was exactly what we needed. I rolled up the letter, stuffing it into my robe, along with several other scrolls. Then I relocked the chest, returned the key to the Marquis's neck, and slipped back out the window. I was halfway across the GA den when a voice shouted, "Hey, you there?" I froze. A guardi stood at the edge of the wisteria trellis, his SPAR leveled at me. I dropped the lantern, plunging the GA den into darkness, and ran. The guardi shouted again, and I heard the pounding of footsteps behind me. I veered toward the well, my feet flying over the damp grass. The tunnel entrance was just ahead. I dove in, scrambling down the narrow passage. The guardi's footsteps followed, then stopped at the entrance. "She went in the tunnel," he yelled. "Get torches." I crawled faster, my knees scraping against the dirt. Behind me, I heard the guardias arguing, whether to follow or wait for reinforcements. I kept moving, the darkness pressing in on me. Finally, I saw the faint light of the GA den exit. I burst out, gasping for air. Feng and Lei were there, their swords drawn. "Run!" Feng hissed, and we took off, cutting through the alleys, the shouts of the guardias fading behind us. We didn't stop until we were miles outside the city, collapsing in a copse of trees. I pulled out the scrolls, my hands trembling. "I got them," I whispered. Lei grinned, clapping me on the back. "Well done, girl. The Duchess will be pleased." We rested for an hour, then continued on foot. By midday, we reached a rendezvous point, a small inn on the side of the road. The Duke of Liang was there, a tall, imposing man with Xiao Li's eyes. He listened as I explained what I'd found, his face growing darker with each word. When I handed him the scrolls, he unrolled them, his jaw tightening. "This is treason," he said, his voice low. "High treason. With this, we can arrest the Marquis, expose Wei Rong, and protect the Crown Prince." "What about Zhao Li?" I asked. "He needs the antidote. And he needs to be moved before the Marquis realizes the records missing." The Duke nodded. "I've already sent men to the estate. They'll retrieve him tonight, bring him to a safe house in the city. You'll go with him, administer the antidote, keep him stable until we can move him to Jing." He looked at me, his expression softening slightly. You've done well, girl. More than well. You've saved my son's life. For that, you'll always have a place in my household. I bowed, relief washing over me. It was working. The plan was working. That night, we returned to the capital under cover of darkness. The Duke's men met us at the city gate, reporting that Zhao had been extracted safely. We rode to a nondescript house in the western Quaruta, where Zhao was waiting. He was pale, thinner than I'd remembered, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. You came back, he whispered. I said I would, I said, sitting beside him. I mixed the antidote into a cup of tea, handing it to him. He drank it down, grimacing at the taste. How long? He asked. The antidote will slow the poison, I said. But we need to get you to Jing. The Duchess has a physician there. He can finish the treatment. He nodded, leaning back against the pillows. The Duke told me what you did. Stealing the records, sneaking into the Marquis's study. You're incredible. I smiled, taking his hand. We're a team, remember? He squeezed my hand, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. Team, he echoed. I like that. Over the next few days, we stayed hidden in the safe house, waiting for the Duke's signal. The city was in an uproar. The Marquis had discovered the theft, and his men were sea-urching every house, questioning every servant. But we were well hidden, and the Duke's men kept us supplied with food and news. On the fourth night, the signal came, a single candle in the window of the house across the street. It was time to move. We left under cover of darkness, a small group, Zhao, me, Feng, Lei, and 2 of the Duke's men. We traveled on horseback, moving quickly through the night. By dawn, we'd reached the Duke's estate in Jing. The Duchess was waiting, her face breaking into a re smile when she saw Zhao. My son, she whispered, embracing him. Then she turned to me, her expression softening further. And you, welcome home. Home. The word felt foreign but right. For the first time in 2 lives, I had a place where I belonged. Over the next few weeks, Zhao recovered rapidly. The physician's treatments, combined with the antidote, flushed the poison from his system. He gained weight, his color returned, and the coughing fit stopped. I stayed by his side, administering the medicine, helping him regain his strength. We talked for hours about his childhood, his FIA-RS, his hopes for the future. He told me about his mother's strictness, his father's quiet support, the loneliness of being a prince in a court full of vipers. I told him about my life as a scullery maid, the small kindnesses that had kept me going, the rage that had fueled my escape. One evening, as we sat in the GA den watching the sunset, he turned to me. When this is over, when Wei Rong is defeated, and I'm on the throne, what do you want? He asked. You could have anything. A title, land, a position in the court. Name it, and it's yours. I thought about it, watching the koi swim in the pond. I want to be free, I said finally. Free to choose my own path. Free to speak my mind. Free to never be sold again. And I want to help people like me, the servants, the runaways, the forgotten. I want to open schools, teach them to read, to defend themselves. I want to change the laws, so no one can be sold like cattle ever again. He smiled, taking my hand. Then, that's what we'll do. Together. You'll be my advisor, my partner. And when I'm emperor, we'll change this empire. For the better. I leaned my head on his shoulder, content. The road ahead was still dangerous. Wei Rong was still out there, the Marquis was still plotting, the court was still full of vipers. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid. I had allies. I had a purpose. And I had Zhao. Together, we could face anything as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. I closed my eyes. This was the life I'd fought for. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. And I'd be damned if I let anyone take it from me again. The physician's fingers lifted from Zhao's wrist, but the silence he left behind felt heavier than the humid air in the Duchess's private chamber. Outside, rain lashed the plastered windows, turning the koi pond into a sheet of silver ripples. Zhao sat propped against embroidered cushions, his face still too thin, but the yellow tinge had faded from his eyes. He looked at me, his gaze steady. Well, the old man bowed, tucking his ivory needles into a silk roll. The poison is purged, Your Highness. The Baiha root did its work, and the decoctions I've prescribed will rebuild your strength. Another month of rest, and you'll be fit to ride. Relief loosened the knot in my chest, but I kept my face still. We weren't safe yet. The Emerquis was still free, Wei Rong's army was still massing, and the Emperor, Zhao Li's own father, remained ignorant of the viper coiled in his court. I glanced at the Duchess, who stood by the lacquered screen, her purple sleeves blending with the dusk. She gave a minute nod, her eyes sharp. Leave us, she told the physician. When the door clicked shut, she turned to her son. The Duke has the records. He's drafting a petition to the Emperor, but presenting it requires precision. If we accuse the Emerquis without undeniable proof, we risk civil war before Wei Rong's forces are recontained. She paused, her gaze shifting to me. Which brings us to the next step. The Emerquis's ledger lists payments to a captain in the City Watch, Jin Biao. He controls the night patrols in the Western District. If we can flip him, we gain eyes inside the Emerquis's network. But he's loyal to silver, not oaths.
Zauli Fronat.
Jin Biao's a brute. He won't turn without leverage. I know where his leverage is, I said. All heads turned to me. I kept my voice even, remembering the scullery gossip. Servants heard everything, especially when masters forgot they had EARS. His mother lives in a tenement in the Western Gate. She's bedridden. If we threaten her, he'll talk. But we need someone he won't recognize as court-affiliated. Someone disposable. The Duchess arched an eyebrow. You're volunteering. I'm the only one who can pass unnoticed, I said. In the capital, I'm a ghost, a runaway servant no one's residential about. If Jin Biao sees a noble's face, he'll bolt. If he sees me, he'll see a beggar or a thief. Easy prey. Zhao Li's hand closed over mine. It's too dangerous. If he recognizes you from the estate, he won't. I cut in. I kept my head down. Besides, we need his patrol schedule. The Duke's men can't move against the Emerquis without knowing when the streets reclear are. I looked at the Duchess. Give me the silver. I'll buy his sea operation. She studied me for a long moment, then withdrew a pouch from her sleeve. It landed on the table with a metallic clink. 200 taels. Enough to tempt him, but not enough to make him suspicious. Feng and Lei will shadow you. If you're not back by midnight, they're to extract you by force. I tied the pouch to my belt, the weight familiar are. Understood. The rain had eased to a drizzle by the time I slipped out the postern gate. Feng and Lei melted into the shadows behind me, their dark cloaks blending with the night. The streets of Jing's capital suburb were quiet, the usual evening vendors packed away, the air smelling of wet EARTH and wood smoke. I kept to the alleys, my borrowed cotton robe, mended, scratching my skin. It was a FAR cry from the silk I'd worn in the palace, but it fit the role. A woman with nothing to lose. Jin Biao's mother's tenement was a crumbling 3-story building wedged between a tannery and a wine shop. The stench of urine and rot hit me before I reached the stairwell. The steps groaned under my feet, the banisters sticky with grime. Her room was on the top floor, the door hanging inside. A single candle sputtered on a crate, illuminating a gaunt woman hunched on a straw mat. Her breathing was labored, rattling in her chest. Captain Jin's mother? I asked softly. She turned roomy eyes Tawa, me. Who wants her? Someone who can make her life easier, I said, crouching beside her. I placed a silver ingot on the crate, one of 10 I'd peeled off the top of the pouch. Her gaze fixed on it, hunger warring with suspicion. Tell me where your son drinks after his patrol.
And don't lie.
I'll know. She licked cracked lips. The rusty nail. Off the silk Emerquet. Back room. He takes his cut of the brothel's earnings there, after the 3rd watch. I left the ingot and slipped out. The rusty nail was a dive, low ceilings, sawdust floors, the air thick with the smell of stale beer and cheaper perfume. I waited across the street, huddled in a doorway, watching the entrance. At the third watch, a burly man in a watchman's leather jerkin staggered out, supported by two women in painted faces. Jean Biao. Drunker than I'd expected, but not too drunk to notice a stranger. I stepped into his path as he turned Tawa, RD the alley. Captain Jean. A word. He squinted, his hand dropping to the cudgel at his belt. Who's the skin? Someone who knows about the extra silver in your pocket, I said, keeping my voice low. The silver from the Marquis of Dingbei. The silver that's supposed to buy your silence about the northern shipments. His pupils contracted. The women giggled and wandered off, sensing trouble. You got a death wish, girlie? He grabbed my ARM, his fingers digging into the muscle. I didn't flinch. Fong and Lei were 50 paces behind me, but I didn't need them yet. Let go, I said, or I'll tell the Duchess of Liang where your mother sleeps. And how much silver it'll take to make her sleep permanent. His grip loosened. You're with the Liang family? He laughed, RSH, bitter sound. Figures. The Marquis said you'd crawl out of the woodwork. He leaned in, his breath reeking of GA relic and spirits. What do you want? The patrol schedules for the next 7 nights, I said. And the names of the men on your detail who are loyal to the Marquis. In exchange, your mother lives, and you keep your shari of the silver. Refuse, and the next time you see her, it'll be in a pine box. He read at me, his jaw working. Then he spat on the ground.
Fine.
Meet me here tomorrow, same time. I'll have the list. But if this is a trap, it's not, I said. But if it were, you'd already be dead. Consider this a courtesy. I walked away, my heart pounding, but my step steady. Foam materialized at my elbow. Well done, he murmured. Lei's tracking him. He'll lead us to the others. Back at the estate, I handed the list to the Duchess. She scanned it by lamplight, her lips thinning. 7 men, all placed on key intersections. The Marquis has the Western District locked down. She looked up at me. You've given us the key to unlock it. But we need more. The ledger mentions a weapons cache in the old temple outside the North Gate. If we can seize it before Wei Rong's men, we cripple his advance. I'll go, I said. The temple's abandoned. I can scout it, confirm the location, and marque the Gua RDS rotations.
Zauli stood abruptly.
Absolutely not. It's too close to the Marquis's patrols. If you're caught, I won't be, I said, meeting his gaze. I've spent years slipping past Gua RDS. It's what I do. And if I don't go, we risk sending men into an ambush. The Duke's forces are too valuable to waste on a guess. The Duchess held up a hand. She's right. But she doesn't go alone. Feng, Lei, you accompany her. Stay out of sight unless she's compromised. And take this. She handed me a slender whistle, CA Reved from bone. Blow it once if you're in trouble. Twice if you need immediate extraction. 3 times if you've found the cache. The old temple crouched on a hill overlooking the northern road. Its roof caved in, its walls crawled with ivy. We approached from the REAR, using the overgrown gullies for cover. The rain had stopped, but the ground was slick with mud. I crawled to the edge of a ridge, peering down at the temple courtier road. 2 Gua RDS hunched by a brazier, their armor gleaming dully in the moonlight. Beyond them, the temple doors were red with fresh timber. Weapons inside, Feng whispered, pointing to the tracks in the mud, CART ruts, leading to the doors. At least a dozen crates. I nodded, memorizing the layout. The Gua RDS changed every 3 hours, according to the rotation I'd observed from the ridge. The next shift was due at the second watch. We'll marque the crates, I murmured. But we don't touch them yet. Wait for the Duke's signal. We retreated as silently as we'd come, leaving no trace in the wet grass. Back at the estate, I reported to the Duke, who'd arrived that evening with a detachment of his personal Gua Road. He unrolled a map of the capital, his finger tracing the Western District. With Jean Biao's list, we can bypass his men. The Marquis will expect an attack from the north, but we'll hit him from the west, seize the ledger's originals, and pin him before he can flee. Then we move on the temple. What about Wei Rong? Zhao Li asked. He was sitting now, a fur draped over his legs, but his voice was strong. If we move against the Ameriquis, Wei Rong will accelerate his timeline. He won't, I said. The ledger shows he's waiting for the Ameriquis to secure the capital's gates. Without that, he risks a siege. We hit the Ameriquis first, disrupt the siege ordination, and Wei Rong will hesitate. That hesitation gives us the window to take the temple. The Duke nodded slowly. Sound logic. But we need to move fast. The Emperor's birthday is in 10 days. The Ameriquis will host a banquet, his last chance to consolidate power before the court gathers. We strike the night before. The Western District will be quiet, the patrols predictable. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. I drilled with Feng and Lei, practicing hand signals and evasion routes. The Duchess's spies brought hourly updates. The Ameriquis had doubled the Gua RDS at his estate. Jin Biao's men were growing restless, and Wei Rong's scouts had been spotted NEA, the northern pass. Tension coiled tighter with each sunset. On the 9th night, the Duke gathered us in the Wa room, a converted storehouse smelling of oil and old leather. Maps covered the tables, weighted down with brass candlesticks. Tonight, the Duke said, his voice low. Feng, Lei, you'll lead the first team. Disable the patrols on the western avenues. Leave no witnesses. Zhao Li, you'll remain here with the reserve. If the Ameriquis escapes, you're our insurance. He looked at me. You'll accompany the second team to the temple. Secure the cache, but do not engage unless necessary. We need those weapons intact. I nodded, my palms damp. This was it. The culmination of weeks of planning, of risking my neck in alleys and rain-soaked temples. Failure wasn't just my death. It was Zhao Li's, the Duchess's, the Duke's. The end of any hope for the realm. We moved out at midnight, the clouds obscuring the moon. The city was a maze of shadows, the only sounds the drip of water from eaves and the distant howl of a dog. Feng's team melted into the side streets, their d'arc forms vanishing like smoke. I followed the second team, 6 men, silent as ghosts, Tawa RD the northern road. The temple loomed ahead, darker than the surrounding hills. As we crested the ridge, a Gua RD's silhouette ape red against the brazier's glow. He stretched, then turned Tawa RD the woods, relieving himself by the sound of it. I signaled the team to hold. When the Gua RD zipped up and turned back, I stepped from the shadows, the bone whistle at my lips. One Shah RP blow. The Gua RD froze, his hand reaching for his sword, but foam was already behind him, a knife pressed to his throat. Make a sound and you're dead, foam hissed. The Gua RD gulped, nodding. Lei bound his wrists, gagging him with a strip of cloth. We crept into the courtier road. The second Gua RD was dozing by the brazier, his helmet tilted 4-way road. I tapped his shoulder. He jerked awake, but Lei's fist connected with his jaw before he could shout. He slumped, unconscious. Inside the temple, the air was thick with the smell of mildew and oiled metal. Crates were stacked against the walls, marqued with Wei Rong's wolf head seal. I pried one open. Swords, freshly forged, their edges glinting in the lantern light. Enough to arm a small regiment. Mark them, I ordered. The men produced chalk, marking each crate with a red X. We worked quickly, the silence broken only by the scrape of chalk and the occasional creak of wood. When we finished, I blew the whistle twice, extraction signal. We melted into the woods as silently as we'd come, leaving the Gua RDS trussed like pigs back at the estate. The Duke was waiting. The Western District is ours, he said, his face grim. Jin Biao's men detained. The Ameriquis is recated in a study, but we've surrounded the estate. We move at dawn. He looked at Zhao Li. You'll accompany me. The court needs to see you alive, and in command. It'll crush the Ameriquis's rumors of your illness. Zhao Li stood, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword the Duke had given him. He looked at me, his eyes d'arc. Stay here, with the reserve. I'm going, I said. I've come this far. I want to see the Amarquis's face when they drag him out. He hesitated, then nodded.
Fine.
But stay behind me. Dawn broke gray and cold. We assembled in the Courtier RD, 200 men, the Duke's personal guardi, their armor polished, their SBA RS gleaming. Zhao rode at the forefront, his cloak billowing, his posture straight despite his recent illness. I rode beside foam, my heat RT hammering against my ribs. The capital was waking as we passed through the gates, vendors pausing to STA housewives peeking from doorways, children pointing at the procession. Word spread quickly. The crown prince was alive. The Amarquis was a traitor. The Amarquis's estate was a fortress of silence. The gates were BA red, the walls lined with A archers. The Duke raised a hand, and the column halted. Amarquis of Dingbei, he shouted. Open the gates. In the name of the Emperor, surrender yourself and your conspirators. Silence. Then a voice, thin, petulant, from the battlements. Duke of Liang, you overstep. I am a loyal subject of the Emperor. This is treason. Your ledger says otherwise. The Duke called back. Surrender, and you'll face trial. Resist, and we take the estate by force. A pause. Then the Amarquis's laugh, high and hysterical. Force? You think I Fia are your ragtag band? Wei Rong's armée will be here by nightfall. You'll all be dead before the sun sets. The Duke signaled. A archers, knock a rose. SBA remen, four-way road. He looked at Zhao Li. Your Highness? Zhao Li urged his horse four-way RD, his voice CA, rhying across the Courtier road. Amarquis, look at me.
I am Zhao Li.
I am not ill. I am not dead. And your lies are over. Open the gates, or we'll open them for you with fire. A murmur rippled through the A archers on the wall. They recognized the crown prince, the legitimate heir, not the sickly cousin the Amarquis had parade. The Amarquis's voice cracked. Shoot him. Shoot the traitor. No one moved. The A archers lowered their bows, glancing at each other. The Amarquis screamed, a string of curses, but it was the sound of a man drowning. The Duke raised his sword.
Chada.
The gates shattered under the weight of the battering ram. We poured into the Courtier RD, the Duke's men sweeping aside the remaining Gua RDS. I stayed close to Zhao Li as we entered the main house, the air thick with the smell of incense and Fia R. The Amarquis was in his study, BA ricated behind a mahogany desk, a dagger in his hand. He looked up as we entered, his face blotchy, his eyes wild. You, he hissed, pointing the dagger at me. You're the one, the servant, the ghost. I should have killed you when I had the chance. You should have, I said, stepping four-way road. Zhao Li's hand tightened on my ARM, but I shook him off. But you didn't. And now you're finished. The Amarquis lunged, the dagger flashing. I dodged, but not before the blade sliced my 4ARM. Pain bloomed, hot and sharp. Foam was there in an instant, his sword knocking the dagger from the Amarquis's hand. The Amarquis stumbled back, tripping over a rug, and crashed to the floor. The Duke stepped four-way RD, his boot pressing down on the Amarquis's chest. Bind him, he ordered, and CRCH the estate. Find every scrap of evidence linking him to Wei Rong. As the Gua RDS dragged the Amarquis away, screaming threats, Zhao Li turned to me, his face pale. You're hurt. I looked down at my arm. Blood seeped through the fabric, dripping onto the polished floor. It's nothing, I said, but my voice wavered. The adrenaline was fading, and the pain was intensifying. He ripped a strip from his cloak, tying it tightly around the wound. His fingers were gentle, his touch RM nothing, he repeated, his voice rough. You could have been killed. But I wasn't, I said, meeting his gaze. We won. He pulled me into his ARS, his embrace crushing. I leaned into him, breathing in the scent of leather and rain and him. Around us, the Duke's men cheered, their voices echoing off the walls. The Amarquis's reign of terror was over. Wei Rome was next. And for the first time since I'd woken in that brazier-heated room, I allowed myself to believe that survival wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. Over the next 3 days, the estate was stripped ba ledgers, letters, maps. All were ca route to the Duke's headquarters Rudis, where scribes worked day and night to catalog the evidence. The Marquis was imprisoned in the palace dungeons, awaiting trial. Jean Biao and his men were arrested, their confessions adding weight to the case. And Wei Rong, true to the Marquis's prediction, launched his assault on the northern pass. But without the Marquis's coordination, his forces were disorganized, their supply lines vulnerable. The Duke's men, bolstered by the seized weapons from the temple, repelled the attack within a week. Wei Rong himself was captured trying to flee across the border, his wolf fur mask disque writhed in the mud. The emperor, finally informed of the conspiracy, was furious. He stripped the Marquis of his titles, confiscated his lands, and ordered his execution. Wei Rong was given the same sentence, his head displayed on the city gate alongside the Marquis's. The court was purged of their sympathizers, and Zhao Li, now fully recovered, was formally reinstated as crown prince. The Duchess oversaw the transition, her efficiency ensuring stability. And I stood at Zhao Li's side during the victory banquet, my arm bandaged but functional, as nobles who'd once ignored me now bowed low. That night, as the festivities wound down, Zhao Li led me to the palace Reborn. The moon was full, the lotus flowers in bloom. He stopped by the pond, turning to me, his eyes soft. "You never told me," he said, "why you risked everything for me. A scullery maid, a runaway. You owed me nothing." I leaned against the balustrade, watching the koi glide through the water. "Maybe I did owe you," I said. "In another life, I was sold to Wei Rong. I died on his executioner's block, wondering why no one had saved me. This time I got to be the one who saves someone else. Who chooses to save someone else." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he took my hand, lifting it to his lips. "Then I'm grateful for that other life. Grateful it led you to me. And I swear, from this day forward, you'll never be sold again. Never be a servant again. You'll be my equal, my partner, my everything." I looked at him, at the man who'd gone from a poisoned shadow to a beacon of hope, and smiled. "Everything," I echoed. "I like the sound of that." He kissed me then, soft and slow, under the moonlight. And as his arms wrapped around me, I knew this wasn't just survival. This was living. Truly, deeply, irrevocably living. And it was only the beginning. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of adjustments. Zhao Li threw himself into governance, reversing the Marquis's corrupt edicts and rebuilding the treasury. I worked alongside him, my days filled with reviewing petitions, advising on policy, and, at the Duchess's urging, drafting a proposal for a school for servants' children. The court was wary of me at first, my origins a source of gossip, but Zhao Li's unwavering support silenced most dissent. Those who persisted found themselves on the receiving end of the Duchess's sharp tongue or the Duke's cold estiere. One afternoon, as I sorted through a stack of petitions in Zhao Li's study, a servant announced a visitor. Granny Lin stood in the doorway, her hair whiter than I remembered, but her eyes as sharp as ever. I rushed to her, embracing her frail form. "You came," I said, my throat tight. "Couldn't stay away," she muttered, patting my back. "He rode you'd gone from scullery maid to prince's advisor. Figured you'd need someone to keep you humble." She looked past me to Zhao Li, who'd risen from his desk. "Your Highness, the girl owes me a favor. Thought I'd collect." Zhao Li bowed, a re-smile touching his lips. "Anything, Granny Lin. She saved my life. I'm forever in your debt." She waved a dismissive hand. "Save the pretty words. I'm here for the herbs. The palace Reborn's area disgrace. No Baiha, no Huangqi, half the plants mislabeled. I'm here to fix it." She fixed me with a GLA and to check on this one. Make sure she's eating properly. She always was too skinny. I laughed, the sound bubbling up from a place of pure joy. This was family. Not blood, but chosen. The scullery maid, the old herbalist, the crown prince who dared to trust a ghost. As Granny Lin launched into a lecture on proper soil composition, Zhao Li caught my eye, his expression tender. I mouthed the words "thank you," and he mouthed back "you're welcome." That night, as we lay in bed, the windows open to the summer breeze, Zhao Li traced patterns on my palm. "What's next?" he asked softly as I turned to him, the moonlight silvering his features. "Next?" I smiled. "Next, we change the world. One law, one school, one life at a time. And we do it together." He kissed my forehead, pulling me close. "Together," he agreed. Outside, the lotus flowers swayed in the wind, their petals brushing the water. And somewhere, in the space between heartbeats, I felt the ghost of my old self, the girl who died on the block, smile and fade away.
She was gone.
And I was here.
Alive. Loved. Free. And that was enough.
More than enough. It was everything. The scent of sandalwood and fresh ink clung to the audience chamber like a second skin. I stood just behind Zhao Li's right shoulder, my hands folded neatly before me, the sleeves of my new robe, a deep indigo silk, a gift from the Duchess, hiding the faint SCA, are on my forearm where the Marquis's dagger had kissed me. Below the dais, the morning court was in full swing. Ministers droned on about grain taxes, border skirmishes, and the proper rites for the upcoming solstice. Zhao Li listened, his expression attentive but distant, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm on the arm of his jade chair. He looked every inch the crown prince, strong, composed, untouchable. But I knew the truth. Knew the slight tremor in his left hand when he thought no one was looking, the way his jaw tightened when the topic turned to Wei Rong's surviving kin, the shadows that lingered under his eyes despite the physician's assurances of his full recovery. A minister stepped forward, bowing low. "Your Highness, Riga writing the reconstruction of the northern grain rise. The funds allocated are insufficient. The winter floods damaged more than initially assessed." Zhao Li inclined his head. "Increase the allocation by 20%. Draw from the emergency reserves. And send inspectors to oversee the work. I want reports every 10 days, not monthly." The minister paled but bowed again. "As you command." I watched the exchange, noting the subtle shift in the court's atmosphere. Weeks ago, they dismissed Zhao Li as a sickly pawn. Now they listened. Thea read him, perhaps. Respected him, slowly. But respect was a fragile thing, easily shattered by whispers of instability. And the whispers had STA root. I'd heard them in the halls, seen them in the sidelong glances cast my way. The crown prince is influenced by a former servant. Asterisk, she holds his EAR, but what does she know of statecraft? Asterisk, a woman with no lineage, no family, dangerous. Zhao Li caught my eye, a flicker of understanding passing between us. He knew. He always knew. After the audience, as we walked the colonnade back to his private chambers, he let his hand brush mine. "They're circling," he murmured, "like vultures." "Let them," I said. "Vultures only circle the dying. And you're not dying, Zhao Li. You're thriving." He stopped, turning to face me, his back to the open archway overlooking the GA Reden. "Am I? Some days, I feel it, the poison's ghost. A weakness in my limbs, a fog in my mind. What if it's not gone? What if it's merely sleeping?" I reached up, cupping his cheek. His skin was solid. "It's gone. The physicians confirmed it. Granny Lin confirmed it. And I confirm it. You're stronger than you think. Stronger than they want you to think." He leaned into my touch, his eyes closing for a brief moment. "With you, maybe. Without you," he trailed off, opening his eyes to meet mine. "I need you beside me, Shen. Not just as an advisor, but as more. The court needs to understand that. The emperor needs to understand that." I knew what he was asking. A formal title, a public acknowledgement of my position. It was a dangerous move. Cementing my place would make me a bigger target, inviting more scrutiny, more attacks. But it would also shield me, give me the authority to act without constant challenge. And it would bind me to him in the eyes of the world, a décret ration that I wasn't just a passing fancy, but a permanent fixture in his life. In the realm's future. Then ask me properly, I said, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. In front of the court. In front of your father. Let them see who I am to you. He smiled, a slow, genuine curve of his lips that transformed his face.
Tonight, then.
During the family banquet.
My father will be there.
It's time. The family banquet was a smaller affair than the morning court, held in the private dining hall of the inner palace. The emperor sat at the head of the table, his face etched with the weariness of a man who'd ruled too long and seen too much treachery. The empress was absent. She'd died years ago, and the emperor had never taken another consort. The duchess and the duke flanked him, their expressions ruefully neutral. Zhao Li and I sat opposite them, and the tension was palpable. The emperor's eyes, Shah RP despite his age, kept drifting to me, assessing, weighing. Midway through the meal, Zhao Li set down his chopsticks. The clink of porcelain ceased. Father, he said, his voice clear and firm. I have an announcement. The emperor raised an eyebrow, dabbing his lips with a napkin. Speak. Shun has been my advisor, my partner, and my savior, Zhao Li said, reaching for my hand under the table. His fingers intertwined with mine, a silent anchor. Without her, I would not be here today. She uncovered the Marquis's treason, secured the evidence that convicted him, and helped dismantle Wei Rong's network. Her wisdom, her courage, her loyalty beyond question. Therefore, I wish to formally name her as my principal advisor, with the rank and privileges of a royal consort. And I wish to take her as my wife. Silence. The duchess's fork paused midair. The duke's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly. The emperor read at Zhao Li, then at me, his gaze like a physical weight. A consort, he repeated, his tone flat. From the servant class. Do you understand the precedent you're setting, Lear? The court will riot. The noble families will see it as an insult. The court will adapt, Zhao Li said, his grip on my hand tightening. As for the noble families, their loyalty should be to the realm, not to their own pride. Shun has proven her worth 100 times over. Lineage matters less than capability. And I love her. That should be reason enough. The emperor leaned back, steepling his fingers. Love, he mused. A luxury a ruler cannot always afford. But, he sighed, a long, tired sound. Perhaps it's time for luxuries. Heaven knows this old man has had little enough of it. He looked at me directly, his eyes piercing.
Shun.
Is this what you want? To bind yourself to a prince, to a life of scrutiny and danger? There will be no going back. No returning to the scullery, no anonymity. I met his gaze, unflinching. Your Majesty, I have no desire to return to the scullery. I have no desire for anonymity. I want to serve the crown prince, serve this realm, and build a life that is mine by choice, not by circumstance. If that means standing beside Zhao Li as his wife and advisor, then yes, it is what I want. More than anything. He studied me for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. Very well. The betrothal will be announced after the solstice. The wedding will follow in the spring. But understand this, girl. You will be held to the highest standard road. Any misstep, any hint of corruption, and it will reflect on my son. On the throne.
Do not disappoint me.
I won't, Your Majesty, I said, bowing my head. Relief flooded me, and dizzying. Beside me, Zhao Li exhaled softly, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. The Duchess broke the silence, raising her wine cup. To the future crown princess, she said, her voice may she continue to guide our son with wisdom and courage. The Duke followed suit. To the realm, he added. And to those who protect it. The Emperor raised his cup last, a hint of a smile touching his lips. To love, he said softly. And to survival. We drank, the wine sweet on my tongue. Later, as we walked back to our chambers under a sky full of stars, Zhao Li pulled me into a secluded alcove, kissing me with a fervor that stole my breath. Principal advisor, he murmured against my lips. Future crown princess. My wife.
Meaning?
Yours, I agreed, winding my armsa round his neck. And you're mine. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The announcement of our betrothal sent shockwaves through the court. Some nobles offered grudging congratulations. Others openly protested, citing tradition, propriety, the natural order. Zhao Li shut down the protests with ruthless efficiency, demoting 2 ministers who'd been particularly vocal and replacing them with men loyal to him and to me. I threw myself into my new role, overseeing the expansion of the servant schools Granny Lin and I had proposed, streamlining the palace's supply chains to cut costs, and mediating disputes between factions that had simmered for years. My days began before dawn and ended long after the moon rose, but I thrived on the work. For the first time, my intellect, my instincts, my experiences were valued, not just tolerated, but sought after. But peace was never permanent. 3 weeks after the betrothal announcement, a messenger arrived from the northern border, his clothes dusty, his face grim. He knelt before Zhao Li in the war room, where we were reviewing troop deployments. Your Highness, Wei Rong's brother, Wei Shan, has surfaced. He's gathered the remnants of the butchers Mei in the Western Highlands. They've attacked 3 supply convoys, and there are rumors they're planning a strike on the capital itself. Numbers? Approximately 5,000. Your Highness. Seasoned fighters, many of them veterans of Wei Rong's campaigns. They've fortified a position in the Black Rock Gorge, NEARLY impregnable. I stepped 4-way RD, studying the map. Black Rock Gorge was a natural bottleneck, steep cliffs on either side, a narrow pass rely wide enough for 2 wagons abreast. Attacking head-on would be suicide. They're baiting us, I said. Wei Shan knows we'll have to respond to the supply attacks. He's waiting for us to commit our forces to the gorge, then he'll hit us from the flanks with hidden detachments. The Duke, who'd been silent until now, grunted. Agreed. My scouts report movement in the western foothills, likely his reserves. If we send the main army into the gorge, we'll be encircled. Then we don't send the main army, Zhao Li said. We send a feint, a small, highly mobile force to draw them out, while the real strike comes from the north, through the Eagle's Nest Pass. It's a rider route, but if we move quickly, we can hit their REAR before they realize we're there. Eagle's Nest is treacherous, the Duke warned. The path is rely wide enough for a single horse. One misstep, and the entire column plummets. Which is why Wei Shan won't expect it, I said. He'll be watching the gorge, waiting for the obvious move. We give him what he expects, a slow, lumbering force in the gorge, while the real strike moves unseen. I looked at Zhao Li. I'll lead the feint. Absolutely not, he said immediately. It's too dangerous. If Wei Shan captures you, he won't. I cut in. I'll take Feng and Lei and a company of light cavalry. We'll move fast, strike HRD, and retreat before they can react. And I'll have Granny Lin's herbalists with us. They can treat the wounded, and if necessary, they know how to make the water sources undrinkable. Slow Wei Shan's pursuit. The Duke stroked his road. It's a bold plan. Risky but bold. The feint force will need to be visible enough to draw Wei Shan out, but not so large that he suspects a trap. 500 men, perhaps. 300, I said. Small enough to move quickly, large enough to look like a legitimate Vanguard road. And we'll leave signs, disque ride supplies, campfires, the occasional prisoner who escapes, with tales of a Law Ridger force following. Feed his arrogance. Make him think he's winning. Zhao Li was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the map. Finally, he nodded. Do it. But you take an extra company of the Duke's personal guarod. And you report to me every 6 hours. If you're compromised, you retreat immediately. No hiro weeks, sin. Promise me. I promise, I said, though we both knew promises were fragile things in war. The next morning before dawn, I rode out with 300 men, Feng and Lei at my side. The capital was still asleep, the streets empty except for the occasional stray dog. We moved northwest, Tawa RD the gorge, keeping to the back roads to avoid detection. By midday, we reached the foothills, the air growing colder, the terrain rougher. We made camp in a shallow valley, lighting fires to create the illusion of a Law Ridger force. I sent 2 men, CA refully coached, to desert, ensuring they'd be captured by Wei Shan's scouts and spread our false intelligence. Over the next 2 days, we played our role to perfection. We raided a minor supply depot, burned a few empty wagons, and left a trail of Disque ride equipment leading Tawa RD the gorge. Wei Shan took the bait. On the 3rd night, his scouts reported a La RG force moving into the gorge, the Duke's main army, as planned. Wei Shan committed his reserves, leaving his stronghold lightly defended. That was our cue under cover of darkness. I led my 300 men in a wide ARCA round the gorge, heading north Tawa Road the Eagle's Nest Pass. The path was as treacherous as the Duke had warned, narrow, winding, with sheer drops on one side and jagged rock faces on the other. We moved in single file, the horses picking their way CA refully, the only sound the clink of tack and the occasional snort of a nervous mount. Twice, we had to dismount and lead the horses over particularly RLY dangerous sections. My heart was in my throat the entire time, but I kept my face calm, my voice steady, urging the men forward RD. We emerged from the pass at dawn on the 4th day. The western highlands spread out before us. Wei Shan's stronghold was a crude fort built into the side of a cliff, its walls of rough-hewn timber and packed EARTH. It looked formidable, but I knew better. With the main force lured into the gorge, it was vulnerable. I split my men into 3 groups. Fong led one to the north, to cut off any retreat. Lei led another to the south, to block reinforcements. I took the 3rd group straight for the gates. We hit them at first light, the element of surprise absolute. The Guardias were still rubbing sleep from their eyes when we breached the outer palisade. Chaos erupted, shouts, the clash of steel, the whinny of terrified horses. I fought my way through the Courtier RD, my sword, a gift from Zhao Li, feeling light and deadly in my hand. A burly man in Wei Rong's wolf-head livery charged me, his axe swinging. I ducked under the blow, driving my sword into his gut. He grunted, collapsing, and I kicked him off the blade, spinning to face the next attacker. The fighting was brutal but brief. Wei Shan's men were unprepared, their morale shattered by the sudden assault. Within an hour, the stronghold was ours. We rounded up the survivors, securing them in the central Courtier Road. I sea-urched the fort myself, finding Wei Shan in a cramped inner chamber, surrounded by maps and ledgers. He was older than his brother, his hair streaked with gray, but his eyes held the same cruel glint. He didn't struggle as I bound his wrists, just GLA read at me with a hatred that made my skin crawl. "You," he spat. "The servant girl. You think this changes anything?" The bloodline continues. Wei Rong's son is in the palace. I cut in, my voice cold. Being raised as a page, under the crown prince's protection. He'll never lead a rebellion. And neither will you. I nodded to Feng, who hauled Wei Shan to his feet. Take him to the Duke. He'll want to question him. As we urged the prisoners back through the Eagle's Nest Pass, I looked out over the highlands, the sun rising over the peaks. The war wasn't over. Wei Shan's capture wouldn't magically erase the resentment, the ambition, the lingering loyalties to the old regime. But it was a blow. A significant one. And I'd dealt it. Me, the former scullery maid. The ghost who'd refused to stay buried. We returned to the capital a week later, weary but victorious. The Duke's main army had routed Wei Shan's forces in the gorge, capturing most of his commanders. The Emperor received us in the throne room, his face impassive as he listened to the reports. When Zhao Li finished speaking, the Emperor looked at me. You led the feint? Yes, Your Majesty, I said, bowing, and captured Wei Shan? With the help of brave men, yes. He was silent for a moment, then gave a slow nod. Effective. Unorthodox, but effective. Perhaps there is something to be said for unconventional thinking. He turned to Zhao Li. See that she is ride appropriately. And see that this Wei Shan is tried swiftly. Make an example of him. As you command, father, Zhao Li said, relief evident in his voice. That evening, Zhao Li and I stood on the balcony of our chambers, looking out over the city. Below, lanterns flickered in the streets, the sounds of celebration drifting up. News of the victory had spread quickly. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. Your Remmer cable, he murmured. Do you know that? Leading 300 men through Eagle's Nest, capturing Wei Shan, most generals would have hesitated. You didn't. I had good teachers, I said, leaning into him. And a good reason. I wasn't fighting for glory. I was fighting for us. For the life we're building. He kissed the top of my head. Us. I like that. Just us against the world. Not quite the world, I said, smiling. Granny Lin would remind us we're just two people, same as anyone else. And the Duchess would add that we have responsibilities. And the Duke would grumble about insubordination. He laughed, a rich, wah-rm sound that I felt all the way to my bones. Then let them remind us. As long as we remember what matters. Each other. I turned in his arms, looking up at him. The moonlight caught the silver at his temples, the new lines of responsibility around his eyes. He was a prince, a leader, a man who ride the weight of a realm on his shoulders. And he was mine. Each other. I agreed, and kissed him. The trial of Wei Shan was swift and public. He was found guilty of treason, conspiracy, and the murder of imperial officials. His execution was scheduled for the solstice, a stark reminder of the cost of betrayal. The court settled into a wari peace, the nobles chastened by the recent events. My schools for servant children opened their doors, funded by the treasury and staffed by volunteers, including Granny Lin, who read herself the chief instructor of practical survival skills. The Duke's men patrolled the borders, ensuring no new threats emerged. And Zhao Li and I settled into a routine, working together during the day, stealing moments of quiet in the evenings, planning a future that felt increasingly real. One afternoon, as I was reviewing enrollment figures in my office, a servant announced a visitor. I looked up, expecting Granny Lin, or one of the school administrators. Instead, a young man stood in the doorway, tall, thin, with a face I recognized from the palace corridors. Wei Ping, Wei Rong's nephew. The boy we'd read. He bowed, his movement stiff. Lady Shen, may I speak with you? I gestured to the chair opposite my desk. Of course. Sit. He perched on the edge of the seat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I wanted to thank you for spa-ring my life, for allowing me to study here. I know what my uncle did, what my family did. I know I can never atone for it, but I want to try. I want to serve the crown prince, serve the realm, not as a Wei, but as myself. I studied him. He was Renest, his eyes shadowed with the weight of his heritage. Why? I asked simply, because you gave me a choice, he said, his voice cracking. Before, I was just a name, a pawn. You let me be a person. And I saw what you've built here, the schools, the reforms. I want to be part of that. Even if it's just writing books or cleaning the classrooms. I want to help. I leaned back, considering. Wei Ping was a risk. His name alone could stir old resentments. But he was also an opportunity, a symbol of redemption, of the possibility of change. And he was smart. I'd seen him studying in the library, his nose buried in scrolls on history and governance. Very well, I said. You can start by assisting Granny Lin in the Herb Ga Redens. She needs help cataloging the new shipments. Prove your loyalty there, and we'll see where you go from then. Hope flickered in his eyes. He bowed deeply. Thank you, Lady Shen. Thank you. After he left, I sat in silence, watching the sunlight filter through the lattice window. Redemption. It was a theme I understood intimately. I'd been given a second chance, a chance to rewrite my story. Now I was offering that chance to someone else. It felt right. Fitting that evening I told Zhao Li about Wei Ping. He listened, then nodded slowly. You have a kinder heart than I do, Shin. I'd have sent him to a monastery, far from the capital. But if you trust him, I'll trust him. Just keep an eye on him. And on the court. The solstice is approaching. Tensions will rise again. I reached across the table, taking his hand. I'll keep an eye on everything, including you. You've been pushing yourself too hard. The physicians said you need rest. He smiled, squeezing my hand. Rest is for after the solstice. After Wei Shan's head rolls. After the court is truly settled. He sobered. There's something else. My father, he's been asking about heirs. Specifically, when we plan to provide him with a grandson. I felt a blush creep up my neck. Zhao Li, we haven't even married yet. And with everything going on. I know, he said, his thumb stroking my palm. But the realm needs stability. An heir ensures that. And I want that. With you. A child who has your courage, your wit, your kindness. A child who isn't born into the poison and lies of this court, but into hope. He looked at me, his eyes intense. What do you think? I thought about it. A child. Our child. Growing up in a palace that wasn't a prison, with parents who loved each other, who fought for a better world. It was a daunting thought. A wonderful thought. I think I'd like that, I said softly. After the wedding. After the solstice. When the realm is at peace. He leaned across the table, kissing me gently. After the solstice, he agreed. And until then, we keep building. Together. As the solstice approached, the capital prepper read for the executions and the accompanying festivals. Banners were hung, stages erected, and the air hummed with anticipation. I threw myself into the preparations, overseeing the distribution of food to the poor, organizing the schoolchildren to perform at the festivals, and ensuring the security arrangements were flawless. Zhao Li was everywhere, meeting with ministers, inspecting the troops, comforting the families of those who died in the recent conflicts. We snatched moments together when we could, a Shah-read meal in his study, a walk in the GA dens under the stars, a quiet kiss stolen in a shadowed corridor. On the eve of the solstice, we stood on the palace wall, looking out over the city. Below, the festival lanterns glowed like fallen stars, the sounds of music and laughter drifting up. Zhao Li wrapped his cloak around me, shielding me from the chill wind. Tomorrow, he murmured. Tomorrow it ends. The betrayals, the conspiracies, the fear are, tomorrow, we start anew. I leaned back against him. Feeling the steady beat of his heart tomorrow, I echoed. But tonight, we just agree. You and me. No princes, no advisors. Just us. He rested his chin on my head. Just us, he agreed, and for a little while, as the moon rose over the capital, we let the world fall away. Let the titles, the duties, the dangers fade into the background. There was only the wind, the lanterns, and the quiet certainty that whatever came next, we'd face it together. As equals. As partners. As family. And that, more than any throne or title, was worth fighting for. Worth living for. Worth everything. The first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, signaling the start of the solstice. The day of reckoning. The day of new beginnings. I turned in Zhao Li's arms, meeting his gaze. Ready? I asked. He smiled, his eyes bright with resolve. Ready. And together, we faced the rising sun. The solstice dawn broke clear and cold, the sky a brittle blue above the execution grounds. I stood on the raised platform beside Zhao Li, the wind tugging at the hems of our ceremonial robes. Below, the crowd stretched to the horizon, nobles in silk, commoners in rough spun, all hushed as the imperial guard dragged Wei Shan four-way road. His hands were bound, his wolf pelt cloak gone, replaced by a tattered tunic. He didn't look at the block. He looked at me. His eyes were pits of hatred, but beneath it, I saw something else. Fear are good. Let him fear are. Let him understand. In his final moments, that the ghost he'd helped create had become his reckoning. The executioner raised his blade. The crowd inhaled as one. Steel flashed, a dull thud, and then the head rolled, coming to rest NEA, the base of the scaffold. Blood pooled in the packed dirt, arcane and glistening. A cheer went up, ragged at first, then swelling, a primal release of tension that had gripped the capital for months. Zhao Li's hand found mine, his grip steady. He raised our joined hands, and the cheer intensified. The message was clear, the old terror was dead. The new era had begun. But as the crowd dispersed, I felt the weight of the day settle over me. The solstice wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. And beginnings were often more dangerous than endings. The court would see Wei Shan's death as a victory, but they'd also see an opening, a chance to test the new crown princess, to probe for weaknesses. I needed to be ready. The wedding preparations consumed the next 3 months. Seamstresses measured me for gowns, jewelers presented trays of jade and PRL, and the Duchess oversaw every detail with the precision of a general planning a campaign. I endured it all with a patience I didn't feel. My true work happened elsewhere, in the school courtier RDS, where I watched children Leah RN to read, in the Herb GA Redens, where Granny Lin drilled Wei Ping on plant lore, in Zhao Li's study, where we pored over petitions late into the night. The wedding was a spectacle, yes, but the realm was my real bridegroom. Its stability, its prosperity, its soul, these were the vows I intended to keep. One evening, a week before the ceremony, I found Zhao Li in the Wa room, STA ring at a map of the northern borders. His hair was longer now, tied back with a silk ribbon, and the silver at his temples had spread. He looked up as I entered, his eyes tired but the northern tribes restless again, he said, tapping a finger on the parchment. Their new Khan is demanding more tribute, grain, silk, weapons. If we refuse, he threatens to close the passes. I moved to stand beside him, studying the map. We can't give him weapons. That's how Wei Rong remet his men. But we can offer grain, surplus from the southern harvests. And, in exchange, we ask for horses. Their steppe ponies tougher than our breeds. It's a fair trade. Fair, but risky, he murmured. If the Khan decides the horses worth more than the grain, he might raid anyway. And the court will scream if we give away precious resources to our Barians. Then we frame it as an investment, I said. The horses strengthen our cavalry. The grain buys us time to fortify the borders. And we include a clause if they attack, the trade stops permanently. They rely on our grain as much as we rely on their horses. It's mutual dependence. He turned to me, a slow smile spreading across his face. Mutual dependence. You always find the angle. He pulled me into his mess, resting his chin on my head. What would I do without you, Shin? Stumble into a dozen political disasters before breakfast. I teased, leaning into him. But you won't have to find out. I'm not going anywhere. The wedding day dawned bright and unseasonably warm. The palace was a riot of color, peonies in every courtier RD, silk banners snapping in the breeze, musicians playing from every balcony. I wore a gown of crimson silk, embroidered with gold phoenixes, the sleeves so wide they brushed the floor. My hair was piled high, adorned with the gold phoenix pin Zhao Li had given me hours ago, and the jade token from our first meeting rested against my heart, hidden beneath the layers of fabric. Granny Lin fussed over me, adjusting a fold here, smoothing a wrinkle there, her eyes suspiciously bright. You look like a queen, she muttered, even if you did START as a scullery maid. Queens need scullery maids, I replied, kissing her weathered cheek, to remind them where they came from. The ceremony was a blur of incense, chanting priests, and the weight of 1,000 eyes. When Zhao Li placed the crown upon my head, his fingers brushed my temple, a silent promise in the touch. We drank the nuptial wine, bowed to the emperor, and then the feast began. Courses of delicacies I'd only dreamed of in my Arving days: braised peacock, sha RK fin soup, lychees preserved in honey. Dancers whirled in silk, acrobats tumbled across the floor, and poets recited odes to our union. Through it all, Zhao Li's hand rested on mine, a constant anchor. Late in the evening, as the guests grew merry on rice wine, he leaned close. "Escape with me?" he murmured. I grinned. "Lead the way, Your Highness." We slipped out a side door, shedding our heavy robes for simpler GA rements, and fled to the GA Redens. The moon was full, the lotus flowers glowing silver on the pond. We walked hand in hand, the sounds of the feast fading behind us. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I deserve," I said. "But happier than I ever thought possible." He stopped, turning me to face him. "You deserve every joy, Shin. Every blessing. You fought for this. For us." He kissed me, slow and deep, and for a while, the world narrowed to the press of his lips, the rmth of his body, the scent of lotus and night-blooming jasmine. When we finally broke APART, breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I love you," he whispered. "More than the throne. More than life." "I love you too," I said, my voice thick. "Now and always." We stayed in the GA Reden until the first light of dawn tinged the sky, then returned to our chambers as man and wife. The next few weeks were a stolen idyll, long mornings abed, leisurely meals, quiet evenings discussing everything and nothing. But the realm waited for no one. The Northern Trade Agreement was finalized, the first shipments of grain and horses crossing the borders. The schools expanded, with over 200 children enrolled. And Wei Ping, now officially Granny Lin's apprentice, proved his worth, identifying a contaminated batch of herbs that could have caused a minor epidemic. The court began to accept me, albeit grudgingly. I was no longer the servant girl. I was the crown princess, a force to be reckoned with. Then, one morning, I woke with a heaviness in my limbs, a queasiness in my stomach that no amount of ginger tea could settle. Granny Lin examined me, her fingers pressing my wrist, her eyes sharp. She said nothing, but her mouth curved into a re smile. "Send for the physician," she told a servant, "and inform the crown prince that the realm will have its heir." Zhao Li burst into my chambers an hour later, his hair disheveled, his eyes wide. Granny Lin said, "Is it true?" He dropped to his knees beside the bed, taking my hand. "You're with child?" I nodded, laughing at his expression. "Apparently. Though I suspect Granny Lin knew before I did. She's been slipping extra doses of Dangwei into my tea for weeks." He buried his face in my lap, his shoulders shaking. For a moment I thought he was crying. Then I heard the muffled laugh. "An heir," he repeated, lifting his head, his eyes shining. "Our child. A son, perhaps. Or a daughter with your fire." He kissed my belly reverently. "I'll be the best father. I'll teach him to ride, to read, to be kind. And you'll be the best mother. Stern when needed, soft when it counts." "We'll figure out together," I said, running my fingers through his hair. Like everything else, the news spread like wildfire. The emperor was delighted, ordering a month of celebrations. The duchess fussed over dietary restrictions, while the duke commissioned a jade rattle shaped like a dragon. Even the courtiers who'd resented me now offered effusive congratulations. An heir secured the succession, and with it, their own positions. Only the shadows remained, whispers of old loyalties, the occasional intercepted letter hinting at discontent. But for now, the light overshadowed the dark. My pregnancy was blessedly smooth. No severe sickness, just a constant craving for pickled plums and the occasional bout of dizziness. Zhao Li hovered, driving the physicians to distraction with his questions, banning strong scents from my chambers, and personally supervising every meal. I endured it with amused tolerance, focusing on my work when I could. The schools, the trade agreements, the slow reform of the justice system. These were my priorities, my legacy for the child growing within me. I wanted a realm where merit mattered more than birth, where kindness outweighed cruelty, where a scullery maid could become a crown princess, and a servant's child could Leah RN to read. 7 months into the pregnancy, a crisis erupted. The Northern Khan's brother staged a coup, killing the Khan and seizing power. The new ruler, a hot RD liner named Borte, immediately closed the passes, halted the horse shipments, and demanded triple the previous tribute. Worse, he began raiding border villages, burning crops, and taking hostages. The court panicked. Some advocated for war, others for appeasement. Zhao Li called an emergency council, his face grim. "We cannot allow this," he said, pacing the war room. "If Borte succeeds, other border lords will follow. The realm will fracture." War is expensive, argued Minister Chen, a wizened man with a nasal voice. And the harvests were poor in the west. "We lack the grain for a prolonged campaign." "Appeasement is worse," I countered, my hand resting on my swollen belly. "Give Borte what he wants, and he'll demand more." It's the same pattern Wei Rong used. "We need to act decisively, but strategically." "Strategically?" Zhao Li raised an eyebrow. "What do you propose?" I pointed to the map. "Borte's power base is in the eastern steppes. His support is thin there. Many clans resented his brother's rule. If we support a rival claimant, someone with legitimate lineage, we can destabilize him from within. And we don't need a full army. A small, elite force moving fast, striking his supply lines, disrupting his communications. Make him doubt his own strength." The Duke leaned four-way RD, stroking his BA road. "Who is this rival claimant?" "Khan's nephew, Temujin," I said. "He's young, but he has support among the western clans. Borte exiled him to the Banyan lands. If we provide him with gold, weapons, and more importantly legitimacy, he can challenge Borte. And we tie it to the hostage situation. We demand the return of our people as a condition of recognizing Temujin. Borte either releases them to weaken his stance, or keeps them and looks like a tyrant to his own people." It was a gamble. A massive one. But the alternative was a costly war or a humiliating surrender. Zhao Li studied the map for a long moment, then nodded. "Do it. Mobilize the Shadow Company, they're our best. And send a diplomatic envoy to Temujin. Discreetly. We don't want Borte to know we're backing him until it's too late." The next 3 months were a blur of anxiety and activity. I divided my time between managing the domestic response, organizing relief for the raided villages, reassuring the border governors, and monitoring the covert operation. Reports came in via CA Ryer Pigeon. The Shadow Company had made contact with Temujin. Initial skirmishes favored the young claimant. Borte was growing paranoid, executing suspected traitors. But the strain was taking its toll. My ankles swelled, my back ached, and the physicians warned me to rest. I ignored them, driven by a fierce need to see this through. My child would inherit this realm. I'd be damned if I let it be a fractured, torn mess. One night, as I pored over dispatches in my study, a sharp pain lanced through my abdomen. I gasped, clutching the edge of the desk. The pain subsided, but a cold dread settled in my stomach. Premature labor. I rang for the midwife, then sent a servant to fetch Zhao Li. He arrived moments later, his face ashen. "Shun, what's wrong?" "The baby." I managed, my voice tight. "Coming to EARLY." He knelt beside me, his hands trembling as he gathered mine. "Hold on, love. Hold on. The midwife is coming. Granny Lin is coming." His voice was raw with fear. Granny Lin arrived first, her usual composure shattered. She examined me, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Too soon," she muttered. "But strong. The babe is strong. We need to keep you calm, keep you still." She gave orders to the servants. Hot water, clean linens, the birthing stool. Zhao Li refused to leave, holding my hand through contractions that felt like knives twisting in my gut. I bit down on a leather strap to muffle my screams, my vision blurring with sweat and pain. Hours passed. Time lost meaning. There was only the pain, Zhao Li's voice urging me on, Granny Lin's terse commands. Then a final, agonizing push and a thin, piercing cry. Our child. Born a month EARLY, but alive.
A boy.
Zhao Li cut the cord with shaking hands, his face streaked with TRS. He's perfect. he whispered, placing the babe, tiny, red, wrinkled, in my arms. Perfect. I looked down at the infant, his eyes squinted shut, his tiny fists waving. He was so small, so fragile, and yet he was ours. A piece of Zhaoli, a piece of me, a promise for the future. TRS spilled down my cheeks, mixing with the sweat. Zhao Ming, I whispered, naming him after the dawn. Our light. The next few days were critical. Zhao Ming was weak, struggling to latch, his breathing occasionally hitching. The physicians hovered, prescribing tonics and RM compresses. Zhaoli Ba Relai left the nursery, sleeping in a chair beside the cradle, waking at every whimper. I recovered slowly, my body aching, my heart full to bursting. And then, on the third day, a messenger arrived from the north. The news was better than we'd hoped. Temujin had defeated Borte in a decisive battle, reclaiming the Khan's throne. The hostages were released, the passes reopened, and the horse shipments resumed. The northern crisis was over. Zhaoli brought the dispatch to my bedside, his eyes bright with exhausted triumph. It's done, he said, sitting on the edge of the mattress. Borte is dead. Temujin is Khan. And he's sending envoys to negotiate a permanent peace treaty. Our gamble paid off, Shun. All of it. He leaned down, kissing my forehead, then the top of Zhao Ming's head, where the babe lay sleeping in the crook of my ARM because of you. Because you dared to think beyond swords and shields. You saved the North. You saved our son. I looked up at him, seeing the man I'd fallen in love with, the prince who'd trusted a ghost, the leader who'd fought for a better world, the father who'd sat vigil by a fragile cradle. We saved him, I corrected softly, together. He smiled, that slow, genuine smile that still made my heart skip. Together, he agreed. The weeks that followed were a gradual return to normalcy. Zhao Ming grew stronger, his cries more robust, his appetite voracious. I regained my strength, though I tired easily. The court celebrated the northern peace and the birth of the heir with bonfires and feasts. The emperor held the babe, his GNA-led hands surprisingly gentle, and Dekle read a Ya'ar of tax relief for the northern provinces. And I watched it all from the sidelines, my world narrowed to the RMTH of my son's body against my chest, the solid presence of my husband beside me. One evening, as the three of us sat in the nursery, Zhaoli rocking Zhao Ming, me watching from the window seat, he looked up at me. You know, he said, his voice thoughtful, when I was locked in that room, dying from poison, I never imagined this.
Asson.
A peaceful realm. A wife who is my equal in every way. He paused, his gaze softening. You gave me this, Shen. You gave me life. I rose, crossing the room to sit beside him, leaning my head on his shoulder. We gave each other life, I said. And now we give it to him. I looked down at our sleeping son, his tiny chest rising and falling evenly. Teach him to be kind, Zhaoli, teach him to listen. Teach him that power isn't about ruling over people but protecting them. And teach him that his mother was once a scullery maid who fought for her place. And won. Zhaoli kissed the top of my head, his ARM tightening around me. I'll teach him all that. And more. I'll teach him to cherish what we've built. To honor the struggles that came before. And to never, ever take it for granted. He looked out the window, at the moon hanging low over the palace roofs. The solstice was an ending. The wedding was a beginning. But this is the legacy. The reason we fought. The reason we survived. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of milk and sandalwood, the RMTH of my family enveloping me. The ghosts of my past, the execution block, the scullery, the M.A. Requisa's cruelty, felt distant, muted. They were still there, a part of me, but they no longer defined me. I was the crown princess, the mother of an heir, the architect of a more just realm, and I was loved, deeply, fiercely, irrevocably loved. As Zhao Ming sighed in his sleep, his tiny hand curling around Zhao Li's finger, I knew. This was the life I'd been reborn for. Not just to survive, but to thrive. not just to exist, but to build. Not just to be loved, but to love in return. And as the moon watched over us, same as it had all those years ago in that wisteria-scented Ga Ruden, I smiled. This time it wasn't watching a ghost. It was watching a woman who'd claimed her place in the world and would never, ever let it go. The wind ca ride the distant sound of a lute from the Ga Rudens below, mingling with the soft hush of Zhao Li's breathing, the rhythmic suck of Zhao Ming nursing in his sleep. It was a symphony of peace, a melody of home. And it was mine.
Ours.
Forever. And in that quiet, perfect moment, I finally understood. Rebirth wasn't just about getting a second chance. It was about using that chance to create something lasting. Something beautiful. Something real. And we had. Against all odds, against all expectations, the end was just the beginning. The first frost of the year painted the palace roofs white, a crisp bite in the air that smelled of pine and wood smoke. I stood by the nursery window, watching Zhao Ming toddle across the woven reed mat, his chubby fingers clutching a wooden horse Granny Lin had revet. He was 18 months old now, sturdy-legged and loud-voiced, with Zhao Li's stubborn chin and my habit of tilting his head when concentrating. Behind me, Zhao Li sat at a low table, reviewing the autumn harvest reports, but his gaze kept drifting to our son. Peace, I thought, watching the steam curl from his teacup. Real, tangible peace. It had been 3 years since Wei Shan's had rolled on the execution grounds, 2 years since Zhao Ming's premature birth, and a year since the northern tribes had finalized their perpetual peace treaty with us. The realm was quiet, prosperous, healing. But peace-eyed Leah Rened was a precarious thing. It required constant tending, like a Ga Ruden. Neglected, and weeds grewed. A soft knock at the door, and a servant entered, bowing low. Your Highness, the Cholet RS have arrived. They await you in the hall of Leader A Rebrilliance. I nodded, smoothing the folds of my russet-colored robe. Today was the inaugural assembly of the Imperial Academy's Advisory Boa RD, a project I'd championed for 2 years, designed to bridge the gap between the old Cholet RLY elite and the new, practical-minded administrators emerging from the servant schools. Zhao Li stood, stretching, his joints popping softly. He looked older now, the silver at his temples fully gray, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. Ready to face the lions? He murmured, offering me his ARM. They're more like old cats, I replied, taking his ARM, grumbling but ultimately docile. The hall of Leader A Rebrilliance was crowded. Cholet RS in traditional RK robes sat on one side, their faces a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled disdain. On the other, sat representatives from the provincial schools, the trade guilds, and the Melita Re men and women of VA Reed backgrounds, their clothing practical, their expressions intent. I took my seat on the dais beside Zhao Li, surveying the room. This was the new realm, not perfect, but representative. A place where a scullery maid's ideas could sit alongside a duke's decrees. I opened the session with a brief speech, outlining the Academy's purpose, to resay RCH and implement policies that benefited all strata of society, not just the nobility. Then I yielded the floor to Minister Gao, an elderly Cholet who'd initially opposed the Academy but had been won over by its EARLY successes in streamlining tax collection. He spoke of fiscal responsibility and classical precedents, his voice dry and measured. Next, a woman named Lu Mei, once a weaver's daughter, now the head of the Textile Guild, presented data on how revised tariff policies had increased exports by 30%. The contrast was STARK, tradition versus innovation, theory versus practice. The room hummed with quiet debate. After the session, as we walked back through the colonnades, Zhao Li squeezed my hand. You've done it, Shen. You've made the unthinkable ordinary. A weaver's daughter lecturing ministers in the hall of Leader A Rebrilliance. Who'd have thought? The same person who thought a poisoned prince could become a wise ruler, I said, smiling. And that a scullery maid could become his wife. He stopped, turning to face me, his expression serious. Sometimes I look at you, at what you've built, and I wonder if I dreamed that first night in the tunnel. If you're the dream, and the scullery was the reality. But then you argue with Minister Gao about crop rotation, or you correct Zhao Ming's grandma R, and I know you're real. The most real thing in my life. I reached up, tracing the lines around his eyes. We're both real, and we're still building. That evening, a courier arrived from the southern provinces. Not unusual, reports came daily. But this one bore the seal of the regional governor, not the usual clerk, and his face was pale. Zhao Li took the dispatch, breaking the seal with a flick of his thumb. As he read, his jaw tightened. He handed it to me without a word. The news was troubling. Not a rebellion, not an invasion, but a creeping malaise. Banditry was on the rise in the remote hill districts, fueled by a failed irrigation project that had left hundreds of heroines destitute. Worse, local magistrates were reportedly taking bribes to look the other way, and a minor official, a cousin of the disgraced Marquis of Dingbei, was rumored to be inciting unrest, blaming the crown prince's radical policies for the heroines' plight. It wasn't an existential threat, but it was a festering sore. Left untreated, it could spread. We need to go, I said, looking up from the dispatch. Both of us. See the situation firsthand. Show the people we see a and remove that official before he gains a following.
Zauli nudda shluli.
The southern tour was scheduled for spring. Moving it up is risky. The roads will be muddy, the weather unpredictable. And leaving Zhao Ming, Granny Lin will watch him, I said firmly. She'll enjoy the excuse to spoil him rotten. And the Duchess can oversee the court. We'll take Feng and Lei, a small escort. Travel light, move fast. We're not going to War. We're going to listen. 3 days later, we depart route. The journey south was arduous. EARLY winter rains had turned the roads to sucking mires. RCA Riage bogged down repeatedly, requiring the Gua RDS to push. We abandoned it after a week, switching to horseback, our cloaks heavy with mud. We slept in drafty inns or, occasionally, in the homes of local magistrates who greeted us with a mixture of awe and apprehension.
I insista on simplicity, no banquets, no formal receptions.
We ate what the locals ate, slept where they slept. Zhao Li, to his credit, never complained, though I saw him wince when mounting his horse some mornings, the old injury from his poisoning acting up in the damp. In a small village NEA, the border of the troubled district, we found the heart of the problem. The irrigation canal, meant to divert water from the river to the terraced fields, was a half-finished ditch, clogged with silt and debris. The fields were cracked the villagers gaunt, their eyes hollow with hunger. We dismounted, walking among them. A woman, her face lined with premature wrinkles, read at us, uncomprehending. Who are you? She asked, her voice raspy. Travelers, Zhao Li said gently. We the harvest failed. She spat on the ground. Failed? It never got a chance. The magistrate took the funds for the canal, lined his pockets. Now the water stays in the river, and our rice stays in the ground as seed. If it don't rot first. Who is your magistrate? I asked. Magistrate Wen, she said, her lip curling. Cousin to that traitor Marquis. Struts around like a peacock, eats beef while we eat bark. And his men. They'll beat you for looking at 'em wrong. Feng, standing behind us, growled softly. Lei's hand rested on his sword hilt. Zhao Li held up a hand, silencing them. He looked at the woman, then at the cracked RDH. Show us where he lives, he said. Magistrate Wen's compound was a stark contrast to the village. High walls, tiled roofs, Gua RDS lounging at the gate. When we announced ourselves, the Gua RDS paled, fumbling their SBARS. When himself emerged, a portly man in a silk robe, his face flushing crimson as he recognized the crown prince. Why, your highness? This is an unexpected honor. If I'd known, you'd have hidden the evidence, Zhao Li finished coldly. Summon your records. Now. The records were a masterpiece of creative accounting, funds allocated for labor, materials, and supervision that bore no relation to the unfinished ditch. Zhao Li flipped through the ledgers, his expression growing darker with each page. Finally, he looked up at one who was sweating profusely. You stole from the people. You let them serve to enrich yourself. And you used your family name to shield your crimes. He turned to Feng. Arrest him. Confiscate his assets. The silver will be used to complete the canal. Wen fell to his knees, blubbering. Mercy, Your Highness. I was pressured. The Amarquis is dead, I said, stepping four-way road. His influence died with him. You chose to continue his legacy of greed. Now you'll face the consequences. I looked at the villagers, who'd gathered at the gate, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning hope. The magistrate is relieved of his duties. The funds will be restored, and we will ensure the canal is finished before the spring planting. You have my word. A murmur rose from the crowd, growing into a ragged cheer. An old man, leaning on a staff, stepped four-way RD, bowing deeply. Thank you, Crown Princess. Thank you, Your Highness. We thought you'd forgotten us. We didn't forget, Zhao Li said, his voice thick. We came to remember, and to make things right. We stayed in the village for a week, overseeing the initial repairs to the canal. Zhao Li worked alongside the villagers, hauling rocks, shoveling silt, his fine robes replaced by rough spun. I organized the distribution of emergency grain from the regional stores, mediated disputes between neighboring FARMS, and really listened, to the villagers' grievances. At night, we slept on straw pallets in the local schoolhouse, the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. It was exhausting, uncomfortable, but it was also grounding, reminding us why we ruled. Not for the throne, but for the people who tilled the soil, wove the cloth, and raised the children. On our last night, the old man who'd spoken at the gate brought us a gift, a simple clay pot filled with honey from his own hives. For the little prince, he said, bowing. May he grow strong, like the rice we'll plant because of you. Zhao Li accepted the pot, his eyes suspiciously bright. We'll treasure it, and we'll remember you. All of you. As we rode out the next morning, the villagers lining the muddy road to see us off, Zhao Li reached over, taking my hand. This, he said softly, this is why we fight. Not for treaties or taxes. For moments like this. For a pot of honey and a child's future. For the light, I agreed, thinking of Zhao Ming. For our son's world. The journey back to the capital was slower, weighed down by the reports we'd compiled and the quiet satisfaction of a job done right. Magistrate Wen was escorted to the capital for trial, his arrest sending a clear message to other corrupt officials. Funds were reallocated, engineers dispatched, and the irrigation project resumed under strict supervision. The southern provinces settled, the unrest quelled not by force, but by justice. We returned to find Zhao Ming thriving under Granny Lin's Sierra, though he developed a fondness for pulling her braids and stealing her herbal biscuits. The emperor, frielier now but still Shah RP, listened to our report with a nod of approval. You did well, he told Zhao Li. The people need to see their ruler's boots in the mud. Reminds them we're human. Reminds us we're responsible.
He looked at me.
And you, daughter. You have a gift for seeing what others miss. The canal, the honey, small things, but they build empires. Spring arrived, bringing with it the 10th anniversary of our wedding. The capital celebrated with a week of festivals, lantern displays, dragon dances, and a grand procession through the streets. Zhao Li and I rode in an open carriage, Zhao Ming, now 4 years old, between us, waving a small flag. The crowds cheered, not just for the crown prince, but for the crown princess who'd once been one of them. I saw faces I recognized, a former scullery maid from the Amarquis' estate, now running her own bakery, a young man who'd attended the first servant school, now a junior clerk in the Ministry of Works, Wei Ping, now a respected physician in Granny Lin's clinic, his past a quiet footnote. They were the living testament to the changes we'd wrought. That night, after the festivities, we stood on the palace wall, looking out over the sleeping city. The air was mild, scented with the blossoms from the palace gardens. Zhao Ming had fallen asleep on Granny Lin's lap, his thumb in his mouth. Zhao Li wrapped an arm around me, pulling me close. "Tenya RS," he murmured. "A decade since you crawled out of that tunnel, pin in hand. Look at us now." "Look at us," I echoed. "A family, a realm at peace, a legacy." He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "My father grows weaker. The physicians say it's his heart. He won't last another year." He turned to me, his eyes solemn. "When he passes, I'll be emperor. And you'll be empress. The responsibilities will double. The scrutiny will intensify. Are you ready, Shin? Truly ready?" I leaned into him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I've been ready since the day I chose to walk out of that tunnel. The title doesn't change who I am, or what we stand for. We'll rule as we've lived, together. Listening.
Learning.
Protecting." I paused, looking up at the moon, full and bright. "And we'll teach Zhao Ming to do the same. To value service over status, compassion over power, truth over tradition." He kissed my forehead, his lips my wise empress, my partner in all things. He looked down at our sleeping son. "He'll be a good emperor, because he has you for a mother, and me for a father, and a realm that remembers what it means to hope." The emperor passed quietly in his sleep 3 months later, on a night thick with summer humidity. Zhao Li found him at dawn, the old man's face peaceful, a faint smile on his lips. The mourning period was a somber affair. Black banners hung throughout the capital, courtiers wore plain robes, and the usual festivities were suspended. But beneath the grief, there was an undercurrent of acceptance. The transition was smooth, inevitable. Zhao Li was prepared. The realm was stable. His coronation was a grand spectacle, held on a clear autumn day. He knelt before the ancestral tablets, received the imperial seal, and ascended the dragon throne. I stood beside him, now empress, my crimson and gold robes heavier than any I'd worn before, the phoenix crown weighing upon my head. But my back was straight, my gaze steady. I had rened this. We both had. As the court bowed, as the trumpet sounded, I felt a profound sense of closure. The poison prince was gone. The frightened scullery maid was gone. In their place stood an emperor and an empress, bound by love and a red purpose. The Rs that followed were, for the most part, golden. Zhao Li ruled with wisdom and restraint, his reforms deepening. The justice system streamlined, the examination system open to all classes, the Melita re-modernized. I focused on education and social welfare, expanding the school system nationwide, establishing orphanages and hospitals, and advocating for women's rights, slowly, incrementally, against considerable resistance. Zhao Ming grew into a bright, compassionate boy, tutored by the finest Cholet RS, but grounded by summers spent working in the fields with Granny Lin, who read him, a tolerable lad, if a bit soft root. Wei Ping became the royal physician, his skill with herbs and diagnosis renowned. And the Duchess and Duke, now retired, spent their days doting on their grandson and complaining good-naturedly about the youngsters running the show. On Zhao Ming's 15th birthday, we held a coming-of-age ceremony in the Hall of Ancestors. He stood tall, his voice clear as he recited the oaths of loyalty to the realm and its people. After ARDS, as we walked in the Redens, he turned to me, his expression serious. "Mother, you've told me the story of how you came to the palace, of the tunnel, and the pin and the poisoned tea. But was it real? The rebirth RT?" I stopped, surprised. We'd never explicitly discussed that RT of my tale. I'd always framed it as intuition, as keen observation. But Zhao Ming's eyes were too knowing, too much like his father's. Some truths best ride in the heart, not spoken aloud. I said softly. But yes, in a way, I was given a chance to choose differently. To fight for a life, not just endure one. And I chose this. Chose you. Chose your father. He nodded slowly, processing. "I'm glad you did. The realm is better for it. I'm better for it." He paused, then grinned, a flash of boyish mischief. Though Granny Lynn still makes me eat boiled burdock root when I complain of a stomachache. Says it builds character. I laughed, the sound echoing in the quiet den. She's right. Character is built in the small, unpleasant moments. Remember that when you're emperor. I will, he promised. Then he sobered. Father says his knees ache on damp days, that the weight of the crown grows heavier. But when I ask him if he regrets anything, he always says no, that he has everything he ever wanted. Because of you. TRS pricked my eyes. I blinked them back, pulling him into a hug. Your father is a wise man. And I have everything I ever wanted, too. Because of him. Because of you. Zhao Li passed on a winter's night, 20 RS after taking the throne. He was 70, his hair white, his hands red with arthritis, but his mind shot RP until the end. He died in our bed, my hand in his, Zhao Ming kneeling at the foot. His last words were for me. Norigretz, sin. Only thanks. For the life. For the love. For the light. Then he sighed, a soft exhalation, and was gone. The mourning was deep, nationwide. For months, the capital was draped in white. But Zhao Ming ascended the throne with a quiet confidence, his youth balanced by the wisdom he'd absorbed from his father and the compassion instilled by his mother. I stepped back from daily governance, becoming the Empress Dowager, an advisor rather than a ruler. I spent my days in the dens, tending the wisteria, feeding the koi, and watching the realm flourish under Zhao Ming's hand. He married a bright, kind woman from a Sholei RLY family, and they had a son, my grandson, Zhaoan. I held him as an infant, seeing echoes of Zhao Li in his eyes, of Zhao Ming in his determined set to his chin. The cycle continued. On my 80th birthday, the palace held a grand celebration. Zhao Ming, now a seasoned emperor, presided, his own hair threaded with silver. Zhao and, a young man of 20, stood beside him, his wife heavy with their first child. Wei Ping, now ancient but Sha RP-witted, toasted my health. Granny Lin had passed years ago, but her clinic thrived, her apprentices CA relying on her work. The servant schools were ubiquitous, producing Sholei RS, engineers, and artists from all walks of life. The realm was prosperous, at peace, and most importantly, just. That night, I slipped away from the festivities, walking alone to the summer pavilion in the old M.A. Requis's estate, now a quiet retreat within the palace grounds. The wisteria hung heavy on the trellis, its scent sweet and nostalgic. I sat on the bench where, decades ago, I'd first spoken to a poisoned prince. The moon was full, just as it had been that night. I closed my eyes, letting the memories wash over me, the heat of the brazier, the sting of the pin, the terror of the escape, the slow bloom of love, the relentless work of building a legacy. It had been a long life, a hot RD life, but a life lived fully, fiercely, on my own terms. A soft footstep, and Zhao Ming stood in the doorway, his face gentle in the moonlight. Mother? You're missed. The guests are asking for you. I smiled, holding out my hand. He came to sit beside me, his presence a comfort. Just remembering, I said, how it all began. With a choice. A single, desperate choice in a RK tunnel. He took my hand, his grip strong. And what a choice it was. You saved father. You saved the realm. You saved me. He paused, his voice thick. I hope when my time comes, I can say the same, that I chose wisely, that I left things better than I found them. You will, I said, squeezing his hand. You already look at the realm, Zhao Ming. Look at your son. The choices we make ripple outweigh RD. Touching lives we'll never know. That's the burden. And the privilege. We sat in silence for a while, watching the moonlight dance on the pond. Then he helped me to my feet, his arm steady around my shoulders. Come, mother. The night is cold. And Granny Lin would scold me if I let you catch a chill. I leaned on him, my steps slow but sure. As we walked back Tawa RD the lantern-lit palace, I felt a profound peace settle over me. The circle was complete. The scullery maid had become an empress. The poisoned prince had become a beloved ruler. The fragile hope had become an enduring legacy. And I, Shun, once nameless and powerless, had lived a life that mattered. A life of purpose, of love, of light. In the distance, the sound of laughter and music drifted from the banquet hall. Life continuing, thriving. And as I looked up at the moon, the same moon that had witnessed my rebirth, my struggles, my triumphs, I whispered a silent thank you. For the second chance. For the love that had sustained me. For the realm that had become my home. Then, leaning on my son, I walked into the light, ready for whatever came next. Knowing, with absolute certainty, that I had lived.
Truly lived.
And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The end.